Hi, my name is Esther Lunge, and I would like to share with you the testimony of how I survived a plane crash. On the 29th of October 2006, my life as I knew it changed forever. I was in Abuja waiting for a return flight to Sokoto, where I was serving as a youth corper in the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, FAAN. I was a duty flight announcer, which sounds more glamorous than it actually was. On this day, I'd never been to Abuja before, but because or by virtue of the fact that I was serving in the airport, I just looked around and I was looking for frequent flyers to see when they would get up, so I would just go along with them. As we came out of the airport, about to board the plane, the northern heat gave way to torrential rain. And I remember thinking to myself that, oh, can the pilot fly in this weather? But then I also thought to myself that they probably don't cancel flights every time that it rains. And so we got on board. Now, I used to joke with myself that, patience was not one of my virtues. And so I really liked to sit at the front of the plane. But on this day, it wasn't an option because the flight was full. And so they had given me a seat in the middle. And so there I was contemplating where my seat was. And then I heard somebody call my full name at the time, Esther Kema Amoda. And I wondered who knew me on that flight. I looked up and it happened to be the other Esther. So there was another Esther who was serving at the airport. I was with the airport authority. She was with the airline ADC. And so she was sitting right at the back of the plane. And so normally for someone who was already uncomfortable sitting at the middle of the plane, it was very unusual for me to go and say hi to her at the back of the plane, and not just say hi, but actually sit down beside her. But I say something told me now, with hindsight, I know that it was the Holy Spirit. And so I sat down beside her, and that morning, before I had set off from my fellow corpor's house, I had opened my devotional to read the Bible reading for the day. And it was James 3 from verse 14 to 17 that says, in paraphrase, it says, "Who are you that says today you will do this or tomorrow you will do that? That life is like a vapor." And so as anybody who's about to take a trip, you pray and say, "Oh Lord, let my life not be like a vapor," but you don't read it thinking that anything out of the ordinary is going to happen to you. And so I sat down beside her and I prayed, especially remembering, my reading from the morning, but we always thought that it was going to be a regular flight. And so we took off. And this was around like 10:40 in the morning, and we're gaining altitude. All of a sudden, the plane dropped. And we thought it was normal turbulence, and so everybody was shouting Jesus, shouting Allah, but we didn't think anything was going to happen. Shortly after that, again, the plane dropped again. By this time, even though it was 11 o'clock in the morning, the emergency lights had come on in the plane. Outside was dark. The Christians were shouting Jesus. The Muslims were shouting Allah. Children were crying. It was a little bit of mayhem. But still, we thought it was just really bad turbulence, and we're waiting for the pilot to regain control of the plane. Shortly after, I look out of the window, and for lack of a better way to describe it, I hear a loud bow. I look back in front of me, and I'm sitting exactly the way I was sitting in the air, just that in front of me now was grass. The plane had crashed. Now, people ask me, did you black out? What happened? And I always say to them that before that day, I believed in God, but that day I believed in the power of angels, because literally the same way I was sitting in the air is how I was landed on the ground. And you would say, okay, maybe all of us that were in that, segment of the plane, that's how we landed, but that wasn't true, because Esther, who was sitting beside me, the impact of the crash flung her somewhere else. And so it was like a dream. People always ask me, how did it feel? And I say it felt a little bit like a cartoon where you're like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. But I did not know where I was, and I wasn't quite sure what was happening. And so because I like to travel light, I had my hand luggage under my seat, and it was still there, thanks be to God. At the time I had the Motorola Razr. I don't know if you remember that phone. So the clip was in my belt hole, and the phone was on the side. Picked up the phone, put it back in the clip, and then I started to feel my way out of where I was. As I was doing that, I heard somebody shout, "Oh, somebody help me, somebody help me," and it turned out to be the other Esther. So the impact had flung her somewhere else. And so I unhooked her from her seat, and she had a dislocated hip, and then we made our way out of the debris of the plane. Now we're in the plane, and we had no idea where the plane had gone, how far it had gone before this happened. So I did not know if I was in Kafanchan or in Kebbi. All I knew was that I was in the middle of a field somewhere, and it was raining, and I was just like, God, what is going on? Esther, when she saw that I had my bag with me, she said, oh, she had valuables in her own bag, and so she went back into the debris of the plane to go find her possessions. As we're still trying to figure out what was going on, I saw three ladies, one on top of each other, and the one on top was strapping the other two beneath her. These turned out to be the daughters of the Kogi state governor. Now, there was also another guy who was sitting on the floor, spread-eagled, and he was just looking. And I remember thinking to myself that, Uncle, please help now. We're all in shock here. It was after the fact that I realized that there was nothing he could do because both of his legs were broken. And so I was trying to remove the lady on top, and I saw things that I never want to see again in terms of bone showing and all of that stuff. And I remember her crying out in pain. And I said to her, you're alive. They can fix your body, but thank God at least that you are alive. Pulled her off, and then the one in the middle, because she was Hausa origin, her wrapper had gotten entangled in her, because that's their native dress, isn't it? So her wrapper had gotten entangled with her seatbelt. So unhooked her, pulled her off, and then I went back to where we were standing. There was a lady who was standing, her hand, and her leg were broken, and she was crying about her brother. And I genuinely thought at the time that what had happened was the plane had broken in half. So we were on one side, and there was another side that had other people who were in a similar position as us. Because, the northern tradition is that, the men sit in front and the women sit at the back. So I just thought that they were on one side and we were on another. And I was like, you're alive. I'm sure they'll find your brother and your brother will be fine. But that was not to be the case. Shortly after, we saw villagers come out, and we realized then, because of what they had said, that the plane had crashed outside of the airport. But the people in the airport did not know that the plane had crashed just outside. And so the villagers ran into the airport to let them know that the plane had crashed, and also to find transportation for those of us that were able to walk. And so they came with a pickup truck to take me, the other Esther, and this Hausa lady that was crying for her brother, because we're the three that could actually walk on foot. So they took us in the pickup truck, and it was probably one of the worst rides of my life, because we're in the jarring, muddy field, and I just kept getting bumped about. And we got to the airport hospital, and I had an irrational desire to be as far away from the airport as possible. Because I got to the airport and it was mayhem. They were bringing in dead bodies. It was just crazy. And so I called my friends who had literally dropped me an hour or so before, and I said, this is what has happened. Please come and get me. I need to be out of here. And so they came to pick me up and took me to a private hospital, where the first thing that they did was to put me on a morphine drip because I had a banging headache. I remember one of my friends calling me, and I made small talk with her because I didn't necessarily want to let her know that I had just been in such an accident. I remember also my mother calling me, and my mother did not know I was on the plane, and so she said, oh, I heard that there's something happening, a plane that was bound for Sokoto crashed in Abuja. The airport must be crazy. And I said, yeah, the airport is crazy. I couldn't tell her that, her daughter was on that flight. And so I stayed in the airport, in the hospital, taking the drip and everything. But then it became apparent that I would have to go to the military hospital where the survivors were being kept, so that they would not think that I had died and they just didn't find my body. And in fact, earlier Wikipedia entries say, oh, Esther Amoda, one of the plane crash survivors deemed dead, now alive. And so I went to the military hospital where they were keeping the survivors. And just to put it in context, of the 105 people that were on the plane, only 9 survived. And of the 9 that survived, only 1 didn't have any injuries, and that was me, to the glory of God. And so I was in the military hospital, and I was kept there for 3 days to make sure that I did not have any internal injuries, which I did not. And so the next morning, I wake up about 4 a.m. and CNN, is carrying the story, and I see what happened. I see the part of the plane that survived, and I am weeping. I am in tears. Because if you remember, I said I thought that the plane had broken in half, but that was not what had happened. In fact, the only part of the plane that survived was the tail end of the plane, and literally where the mouth of that, the part that survived hit the floor is where I was sitting. And I wept. I remember a nurse saying, "Why are you crying? You should be happy that you're alive." I'm like, that's why I'm crying. I'm crying because, I'm happy that I'm alive. And the ADC people, when they came on their courtesy visit, they said literally that was the only part of the plane that was intact. Everything else was broken pieces and broken bodies, and it was very overwhelming. And so I was there, and the question now became, okay, Esther, you are in Abuja now. Are you going to go back to Sokoto, which is 9 hours by road, or are you going to go back to Lagos, which is also 9 hours by road? Well, my mom made the decision for me. She's like, are you crazy? You're coming back home to Lagos. Okay. So the next question was, okay, how are you going to get back? I was ready to come back by road, but I remember a friend of mine saying at the time, he worked in Virgin Nigeria, and he said, the Lord did not save you on Sunday to kill you on Wednesday. You will come back by air. And I say that that's probably one of the singular decisions that actually cured me, or started to cure me, of my fear of flying, because I had to get on a plane so quickly after. And so on Wednesday, I'm super excited to be coming back home. I'm just, in high spirits just to leave the hospital. And I get to the airport. The airport manager comes to see us, and he takes us on the tarmac to see the plane. And I start to weep. I am weeping. And the pilots, they try to reassure me, that they're going to do a great job and make us land safely. And so they asked me, do you want to sit in the cockpit with us? And I said, do I look like I'm crazy? I'll be at the back of the plane. You just drive us safely. And so for the 45 or 50-minute ride, I held on to my flatmate at the time, and I held on to a random stranger, and I was just weeping through the flight. At the end of the flight, the pilots say, we want to dedicate this flight to Esther Moda, one of the survivors of the ADC plane crash. And so the people on the plane said, oh, who is that? And they said, no wonder, because I'm sure up until then, they probably thought I was a village girl who had never been on a plane before, hence the tears, and there was clapping, there was rejoicing, people were trying to take my picture, trying to put money in my hand, telling me they're going to write books and all of that stuff, and it was just a surreal experience. Now, when people see the trajectory of my life now, they think that, of course, it makes sense that this is the kind of life you'll be living, one that is, bringing a message of hope and almost like serving and dedicated to God. But that was not the case. In fact, for 2 years after the plane crash, I had survivor's guilt. So I was depressed because I did not understand why God would give me such a phenomenal gift. I did not think that I deserved it. There were people that were more deserving on the plane. That was the same flight that the Sultan of Sokoto, his son and his grandson, died on. I knew deacons in my church and deaconesses, growing up, who were on that same flight and had died. In fact, there was a mother with 4 children who both her and the children died. And so I didn't really feel like I deserved this great gift that God had given to me. It wasn't until November 2008 where I got, my healing from the depression, and where God said to me that I've saved you for a life eternal, then you can accept the gift of me saving you in this life with all its wars and rumors of wars. But why am I sharing this story now? Over the last couple of months, in the last year, I have sensed that God has been calling me to serve my country. And it's that thought and the call actually gave me the most sorrow, because for me, I was like, how would you ask me to serve a country that literally tried to kill me? Because in the space of 18 months, there were 6 plane crashes, and nothing was done, either by the Minister of Transport at the time or anything to actually say, let us do an overhaul. Let us actually see what is going on. In fact, the minister at the time said he's not God, so why should they ask him why, why plane crashes were happening on his watch? But in the last 1 year, the Lord has said, I need to serve your country. If you know anything about what is happening in our nation right now, you know that we need hope more than anything else. You know that we need to be able to hold on to something to believe. And I stand here, or I sit here as a sign or as a beacon of hope, saying that if the Lord can save me in such a dramatic fashion, if He can make me a sign and a wonder, because if I did not tell you, if I don't tell you that I survived a plane crash, you would never know. But if the Lord can do such a phenomenal miracle for me, He can do it for our country. He can revive us, He can revamp us, He can make it such that we don't even look like what we've been through. We look and we compare ourselves with the stories of Dubai and the stories of Singapore, and we wonder, how can these things be, or how shall these things be? But if we all play our part, if we all do what we are called to do, if we all live lives of integrity focused on righteousness and justice, we will have the nation that we are praying for. But it is no longer in the hands of government. It is now up to us as individuals to do the work that we have been called to do. Each and every single one of us can make a difference, and this is a plea for us to do just that. All of us cannot migrate. All of us cannot jackpot, as they say. We are here, and we have a duty of care to leave Nigeria better for the next generation. I hope this is inspiring you to not just hear my testimony and thank God for my life, but to look inwards and say, as a Nigerian, could it be that I am called to be Nigerian for such a time as this? Thank you so much for listening, and God bless you. to start certain pivotal conversations that it is my earnest desire are continued in your own homes, in your own communities, and in your spheres of influence. Everybody that's going to be speaking on this stage is someone that carries a heart for our nation, Nigeria, just like you do. And so please, we would like you to participate actively. If you have any questions, please share them in the comments section. But beyond that, have an open heart. Beyond having an open heart, listen and ask, what is my role in building this new Nigeria? This is a call to action. This is a call to our civic responsibility. As you saw in our advert, we are our own heroes. We are the ones coming to save us as Nigerians. And so, thank you once again for being here. Thank you once again for your active participation. And thank you so much. Please, if you know anybody that should be on this town hall, share and share wide. Because I really believe that we're going to have conversations that will shape the way that we think over the next coming years. Thank you, and God bless.
Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and to all our audience, virtual audience who are watching on YouTube. Thank you very much for coming to what is a very important evening. Indeed, as Dr. Esther Longe mentioned, we are the ones who are going to rescue this nation. And so I want to believe that those who are seated in here, the few people who are seated in here and those who are watching online are people who are passionate about Nigeria and see this as a civic responsibility beyond the vote. Also, being able to take part in decision-making like this, bring our heads together and form a citizens-led think tank. My name is Ayo Maire Esse, and I am delighted to be moderating the first panel session for tonight. We're hoping to keep things very fluid, as quickly as possible, concise yet powerful. And so I'd like to introduce the gentlemen. I'm happy to be the only female on the panel today. And actually, it's reflective of what, some of the things we'll be talking about tonight. The participation of people we term sometimes the minority, of whom, unfortunately, in the electoral sense, women are a minority despite our numbers in population. So please permit me to invite on stage the honorable member representing Afijio in Oyo State of Assembly. Many people know him, Honorable Sheyi Adisa. A round of applause, please, as he comes. Also joining us on the panel is a candidate in the February 25, I had to think it was 25 or 11, but definitely 25th of September, because he is vying for a position in the National House of Assembly for Etiosa constituency as a member of the House of Representatives. Please let's make very welcome. Well, shall I? Okay, let me be apolitical tonight. But might or might not be soon coming Honorable Bankole Wellington, aka Rankido. You're welcome. Might, okay, all right. I'm being fair tonight. Okay, thank you so much. We have a very important task ahead of us tonight, and in very limited time that we have for this. I have a few questions. We were actually supposed to have, and hopefully he's able to join us, because I do believe his participation on this panel is quite key. The governorship candidate of the Labour Party in Lagos State, Mr. Gbadebo Rhodes-Vivour, GRV. I hope he'll be able to join us tonight. If he's not able to, please go to his social media page, because this is how we hold our public officers to account. Just, whatever question you came in here with tonight, you can go and ask him on there. Okay, so before I begin to ask the questions, I'd like to just set the tone for tonight's conversation by sharing some background information. It's all statistics. Some of you might already know this, but I thought it was important to lay that as a foundation for the panel tonight. Now, the panel is why your vote counts. And just, I can't see many people. That's why I keep squinting and trying to look into the audience. Well, maybe it's good for you so that you're just, well, let me ask, how many of us have our PVCs here? By show of hands. If you don't have, please, the door is on the right. Just, move. Except you are disenfranchised and you went a number of times and unfortunately they said, we did not find your name or we did not find your card. So just a few statistics to help us to gauge our conversation tonight in terms of how important our votes are. Do Nigerians really vote? How many people are registered? How many of us know this? By now, the INEC website should be our daily. After you read, your bio, just go to the INEC website and be following the numbers. Honestly, because these are the ways, and I'm sure politicians do this. I'm sure, Banky, I can tell you to reel out the numbers in Etiosa as to how many people can vote, and you even map them according to areas, and that's what they do. But it shouldn't only be politicians. It should be all Nigerians. So that's a challenge to you tonight. But let me just quickly read some figures from INEC. So this year, according to statistics, we have 93,469,008 million registered voters across Nigeria. Now, this is up from last election in 2019 when we had about 84 million registered voters. So well done to the additional close to 10 million people who went out to register. So that was work well done. Now, for this year's election, we have, in terms of percentage, a higher number of men register than women, but very close margin, 52.5% male, 47.5% female. And guess what INEC has said? This election is for the young people. So we have the highest number of people who registered this year are young people, and many of them are students. So if you're watching tonight and you're a young person, for us as young people, by the way, it's from 18 to 34. You're middle-aged if you're 35 to 49. But if you put the numbers together of the middle-aged and the young people, you'd have over 60% of us who are going to decide the fate of Nigeria in the next elections. Now, coming back locally, in terms of the highest number of states, Lagos has the highest number of states with over 7 million registered voters, followed by Kano State, and after which we have I believe it's Kaduna. Yes, Kaduna is third with a little over 4 million. And so these are the realities on ground in terms of the registered voters. Now, if you look at the last election cycle, I'll start with banking. If we look at, I'll start with banking. If you look at the election cycle, I'm speaking to you because I know that one of the things you've talked about is how much the numbers that it took to elect the incumbent in terms of the Etiosa House of Reps representative for Lagos State. And you talked about the sheer number of people. So 7-point-something million people, 5 million people registered last year in Lagos. Only 1 million people voted. So your current governor in Lagos State was voted in by only about 700,000 people out of over 20 million people. I hope that sinks in. If we're to look at the registered voters, so the person, if you're complaining at home and you don't like or you like the person, just know that the number of people who voted him in was very minute. So the first question I'd like to ask you, Banky, is this. In terms of the number of registered voters and those who actually go out to vote, how do we convert the numbers? And then in responding to that, I'd like you to share with us why it is important. So everyone here says they have their PVCs, and more than ever, even though there's still millions of uncollected PVCs in Lagos and Nigeria today, we've seen a really good number of people turn out. But it's not about those who turn out to collect their PVCs. It's those who actually come out to exercise their civic duty. So share with us, what are some of the reasons on your campaign grounds why people have explained, and why is it important?
Okay, thank you, Ayo. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Are we fighting? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much for having us here, for putting this together, Esther. God bless you. You're always at the forefront, always using your voice. God bless you. In terms of the numbers, right, you talked about the Lagos State governorship numbers, but let me bring it home a little further because we are in Etiosa right now. So in 2019, there were about 337,000 registered voters in Etiosa. Ask me how many voters, like valid voters, took part in the election in Etiosa. 50,400 out of 337,000. So that's a voter turnout of about 16.3%. Ask me how many votes it took to win these seats that I'm running for. 21,800 and something. In a constituency that has over 300,000 registered voters. That's not general population, no. That's people that even bothered to register. It took about 21,000 votes to win this seat. And so you start to see that, and I've said this for so long that I fear that I'm starting to sound like a broken record. I believe that our biggest opponent in witnessing the kind of change that we want to see in getting to the Nigeria of our dreams, the biggest opponent we have is not one particular candidate or political party or godfather. It is apathy. It is the thought that my vote doesn't count, they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway, I'm not going to bother. And it is in believing that you actually roll out the red carpet for them to do whatever they want to do anyway. So they almost depend on you to kind of sit out the process and stay home and not use your vote, and more importantly, not use your power, or just as importantly, not use your power to influence the votes to be the kind of, or to bring in the kinds of elected officials that you desire. And so the problem for me has always been that one of apathy. People don't understand that rigging is easiest when people don't show up. That's actually the perfect scenario for rigging to occur. And I know my brother Sheyi would back up what I'm saying. I'm running for an election now. The responsibility that we have as a team is to make sure that in every one of our polling units, we have people there to watch, to flag, to track the results, to see the voting go on, to let us know, to report if there's any incident. Because it's when you don't have representation at the polling unit that rigging can occur, that funny business can go on. Now, in Etiosa, we have 725 polling units. So you can imagine the manpower that you need to put together as a political candidate just to protect the sanctity of the elections. But what would happen if the entire citizenry came out and stayed there and watched? There is nothing anybody can do. That is, you know, the power is for the people, but the people for too long have given that power back or have left it alone. And, you know, credits to, you know, at the national level at least, credit to the INEC, credit to the people who were in the assembly who worked to pass certain laws. The Electoral Act that we have has moved our democracy in leaps and bounds. I'm telling you, and we don't have the time to unpack everything, but honestly, all things being equal, by the grace of God, we should have the freest and fairest elections we've had thus far. So rigging was so much easier years before, and maybe we'll get into that a bit later because I don't want to dominate the time. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the ground has been set. All that is left is for the people to show up. Elections are dictated by the people who show up. Not showing up is a vote. Not voting is a vote. It's a vote for things to remain the same. So you show up, you participate, but then it's deeper, and I love that Esther said this when she came up. It's deeper than, for me, at this point, it has to be deeper than voting. It has to be. Because you'll never get everybody, right? But we never need everybody. We don't need everybody. God doesn't need everybody. Check throughout scripture, check throughout history. It's never you never get everybody to come or to show up or to do the right thing. But if you have just enough determined people who intend to play the part in the nation they want to see, we can turn this thing around. So how does it get deeper than voting? Some of us have to run for office. That's what I'm doing. That's what he's done. He's saying, can we put like minds, right thinking people into government? Can we put them at various levels of government? Some of us will do that. Those of us who are not going to run for office, find somebody that is and partner with them. Collaborate with them. Donate, volunteer, amplify. I cannot tell you how hard it is to run a political campaign. I can talk from now till next week and I will not be done. But if you are not the one running for office, then find somebody that believes what you believe and is fighting for what you're fighting for, and stand with them and work with them. This thing has to be a collaboration between those of us who are in the private sector, chasing our own journeys towards success, and those of us who are willing to stick our necks out and attempt this political thing. And let's partner and put right-thinking, like-minded people at the table of government. That's how we turn Nigeria around. If I do a survey right now, just for the people in the room, if you are a card-carrying member of a political party, let me see your hand. Okay, that's 2 people. If you have actively donated or volunteered in this campaign season for anybody, donated, you've given any kind of contribution, or you've given your time where you are volunteering in a campaign office, I'm not talking about even retweeting, I'm just saying you've donated or you've volunteered, please let me see your hand. Okay, in this room already, that's less than 5%. And I'm not saying this to judge you. Please, don't be upset. Don't be offended. Hey, I'm going to offend people.
Yeah, I'm going to offend, and in Ethiopia for that matter.
But you guys get what I'm saying. Yeah. This thing has to be a collaboration, and it has to go beyond voting, which is necessary, getting your PVC, and even beyond conversations like this to say, let us willingly partner to put this nation on the path towards growth and development, because it is possible if enough of us line up. God bless you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go home now.
My heart was like, where are you going? We just started. Thank you so much, Banky, Mr. Wellington, for setting the tone and opening up so brilliantly. You touched on a number of things. You touched on voter apathy, this participation of citizens in terms of protecting their votes, so that beyond, so there are many steps to these things. You register to vote, you ensure you collect your PVC, you show up on the day, and then you don't go home, you wait and count, or you wait and see. And then you also talked about the Electoral Act of 2022, which is a game changer, as many people have said. And we mustn't forget that the president has said a number of times repeatedly that he's committed to a free, fair, and credible, in fact, we call it FFC, free, fair, and credible elections. And his body language has shown that he's committed to doing that as one of his legacies. I'll turn to you, Honorable Sheyi, now, and I'll just ask you in the same vein. So we're talking about the importance of voting. I'd like you to share with us, since you've been serving for about 8 years. This is your 8th year, isn't it? Or in your State House of Assembly. Oh, you're just 1 term. Yes. You're popular. I feel like you've been there for 2 terms. Yeah, I know he's been in government. You worked with the Ajimobi government, so I know you've been in government, but in terms of as a representative, that's fantastic. So I'd like you to share with us the danger or the dangers of not voting, of not utilizing your PVC. Mr. Wellington shared a few things there where he talked about no show is a vote, and it's easier for people to rig in that way. Then beyond that, I'd also like you to share with us, from your experience, this thing he said about voter apathy, and one of the reasons why people choose not to vote. The election is decided already. Politics is a game of money. So we know some people say it's their turn, some people say this is my inheritance, some people say, so why should I bother showing up? I'd like you to speak to that as well.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, everyone, for being here. All right, I think my brother Banky has said a lot. You see, when you don't vote, you make things very easy for the status quo. I remember during my campaign, there were polling units that were less than 20 people. Yep. So if anybody wanted to do anything, you just rack up the numbers there. And that's the reality. So I believe it starts with the mind. Part of the battle is in the mind. And so part of what you get is threats of violence, threats that things will not work, threats that if you go there, they may beat us, they may chase us. And so it's a psychological game that is being played out. And so because of that, many people will not show up. They will, I'll support from my TV screen. I will tweet it. I will do things like that. It's not going to help, and one of the things I tell people, if you're there and you're there with a group of people, you have a stronger chance. When we go, I remember I've been voting since 2011, and every time I go voting, I go with people. You know, I go with family, I go with friends. So we're standing in clusters. You know, you're not going alone, feeling like you're being isolated. So absolutely, please, whenever we have these elections, we must go out to vote. We must, regardless of what is being said. It's my own part, it's my duty. People died for us to have these rights. You know, we sing our heroes past. You know, we sing all of these things. And then we take it as if it's optional. It's a responsibility, and we really have to see it that way. So, I mean, from experience, when there are not enough people in a place, it makes it very easy. Some people come, they shout, everybody runs, and then they do, as it were. And that's a real danger. And then, obviously, with the mindset of it's not going to work, there's no point going, the other people go up and do what they're going to do. I got voted in with under 10,000 votes. It was the highest we had in my own constituency. And, you know, when I think back, I believe that if we had more people, it would be more challenging. Yeah. Do you understand? It will be more challenging, but the numbers are not so many. And so you get in with what's out there. So every time we say, you know, the governor got in with less than 10%, you only mark people based on the question set. Is those that came out, he was the majority of the lot that came out. All right? So if more come out, then maybe he would not be the majority. And it's just how it works. So I believe that we need to understand that this is a responsibility that we're going to take seriously. But more importantly for me, and this was, you know, when we started congresses, I came online and I was shouting that parties are doing congresses. Let's get involved. Well, I was just, people were the ones, what's Congress? Well, what are they talking about? But that was the beginning of the process. That was where everything started to happen. That was where we started to elect those that will become world chairman, woman leader, youth leader. And those people were the ones that would eventually become delegates or will vote, who will become the candidates if you go through indirect primaries. But because, number one, people are not in political parties. Number two, even those that are there, it is a lackluster approach. So we have to get involved in parties. We have to get involved. Yes, Banky said not everybody is going to run for election, and I'm sure, you know, not everybody can run for election because some of us don't have that interest. But once you're involved in the party, you have a lot of influence. You start to pool, and then the sort of candidates that will come out will be a reflection of all of us in that party. All right? So if the candidate thought, if I bring money, I'll buy all of them over, and he gets there and he says, actually, these ones can't be bought, then we're going to have a different contest on our hands.
Okay, so let me ask you about this. I like that you talk about joining political parties.
Yes.
Now, one of the reasons, if you poll a number of Nigerians, one of the reasons they will tell you they're not joining a political party is because the frontliners, they say they are the old system, they are corrupt, so I don't want to corrupt myself, I would not be a part of it.
Sure.
But here you are saying that it is important.
Absolutely.
What is the importance of, number one, the choice of the party you decide to align with, or even being can you just be a part of the political process without necessarily having to join a political party? Because I'm not looking for a career in politics.
Sure.
So why should I do that?
So like Banky said, you might decide to just be a financier and fund people and do all of that. Yes, you may not want to join a political party. However, I believe, and you know, maybe because politics isn't how it used to be. Politics should be an ideology factory, as it were. You know, a factory whereby we're creating people with similar values, similar mindsets. You know, when you say somebody's conservative, we understand what it means. If we say somebody is a Republican, we understand what that means. Then you now have his far right, his mid-left, his center. Then we can say, okay, maybe he's a little bit, but we can tell. Nigeria, we cannot tell. And the reason we cannot tell is because those playing it are using it as just vehicles for elections. It's as simple as that. So until we start to have a push of people going in and starting to, I mean, you know, I asked when I wanted to join politics, so who are the people they call progressives? Because the lines can become very blurred after a while. Everybody's calling themselves progressive like Awolowo. Do you understand? So the lines become blurred. But, you know, what I'm saying is that I believe very strongly, nobody owns any party. It's not anybody's surname. He has no more rights in a party than I do. If we were paying membership dues, all of us will pay the same dues. We are not paying dues. That's why one person can control a party. But if we're paying membership dues, then we are all equal. And so if you have more people of a certain value operate and dominate a party, then it will show in what starts to come out of it. But the fact is that, again, we have left it, and so those that are running it are comfortable running it. Please, you people, stay out of it. We will continue to run it.
Yeah.
All right? So we have to go in, and my normal analogy I put up every time, if you put a glass of Ribena and it's dark, it's blackcurrant, and you start to pour water in it, and you keep pouring water in it, and you keep pouring water, the color will change. It will change, but we have to go in en masse. We have to go in to start to restructure that place. Yeah. Then one person becomes ward chairman, another one becomes woman leader, another one becomes youth leader, and then we start pulling each other up. We start pulling each other up, start putting ourselves in the right positions. Yeah. And then when it comes to things like congresses and delegates and picking candidates, nobody will come and tell me, I'll give you $1,000 to vote me. Yeah. It's not going to work. So we need to get in more people with the right mindsets, right values that represent what we stand for. Yes, it's difficult now because which one should I go to? You know, I've had people ask me that question. If I go to this party, what influences the party for me? It depends on why you're going in.
What influenced the party for you?
So for me, well, excuse me, mine was more of, I started as a technocrat, and then I was, you know, integrated in. But I believe that if you want to run for elections, it's a big factor, all right? Building a smaller party is a long-term project, all right? But it's not impossible. But I believe very strongly that if you, for example, as I said, I came in because I was already working as a technocrat, and then I started doing political stuff, and then I got in. And then I just believe very strongly that if you're going to run, that would affect your thinking. So in certain areas, some parties are stronger than others.
So yours was strategic?
Mine was strategic.
All right,
yes.
Okay. I'll come back to that now, because I'd like you, the next question, I'll come to Mr. Wellington now, but the next thing I'd like you to speak on, so that you just gather your thoughts, is that I want us to do a bit of voter education this evening. You know, when people hear about elections, they think it's a simple majority by which people win. And you see some political players bringing out their calculators. And I'm sure you've heard some politicians talking about, you know, 25% of votes, etc. And people are not very aware of that. I'd like us to just break that down so that even in terms of strategy for voting, you understand how politicians think. But let me come to you, Mr. Wellington. I came to you here because talking about the strength of your party, in 2019, you ran under the Modern Democratic Party, MDP, and then you moved, you know, and it was your first foray into mainstream politics. And whilst you had a big name in the entertainment industry, won your laurels, your household name, but when it came to politics, you saw that it was a different ball game. And then come 2023 elections, you are running under one of the big 3 or 4, as some people might think, People's Democratic Party. I'm sure you got a bit of flack for that when you announced that you were running. What is the importance of the kind of party? Then for those who are voting, there's this thought around, who should I be voting for? The party or the person? I'm glad that you spoke about the difference between like what they have in the UK or the US, where you are born Tory or you adopt it. I mean, when I was in university, you already knew those. From a young age, you're groomed and you know where you align with because of ideology and because they align with your ideology. But in Nigeria, it doesn't really work like that. So I'm conflicted sometimes. Or those who are watching are conflicted. I like you, but that party you're on, is it, which one is your, or the umbrella? I just don't want to come under your umbrella. And some people are like, you know, I want to. So there's that contention in the hearts of people. And then I would want you to. So 2 questions I'm asking you: the importance of that. What should people be looking out for in terms of the candidate? I'm facing the candidate now. The second part is this: they talk about experience and track record, and so a number of politicians are campaigning on that. That who is Mr. Wellington? What does he know about politics? How is he going to represent you? And it's not, I'm just using you as an example because you're here. They say that even about some presidential candidates, that there's no structure. Where are you coming in from? How important is it for people who are watching now and still tethering, like, should I vote, you know, this or that, but this person...
You should vote for me.
I didn't say you should campaign. You know, is it not a waste of my vote? Yes, that's a common thing. Why should I vote for this person? No, but it's not a waste of my vote.
Okay. Man, you asked a full jam question. All right, so first let me start where you started, which is my own political experience. So in 2019, I ran for the House of Representatives, and it was a party called Modern Democratic Party. We say it was a party, but really it was me and my friend. His name is BK Olateru Olagbegi, amazing guy, fantastic young man, and myself. So BK was the chairman of the party, and he was running in Ondo State, and then I was running in Lagos. And that's, we sat down, we talked it out, we said, this is all we're going to do, because you can't bite off more than you can chew, right? So those were the only 2 seats that we ran for. And by most accounts, we ran the kind of campaign that a lot of Nigerians were proud of. In fact, and I don't say this to brag, but I just want to paint a vivid picture of the reality of politics. So in 2019, we had, I think, 73 people running for president, 73. And me that I was running in only Etiosa, we got more votes in Etiosa than almost 50 people who were running for president of the country. And the reason I say that, it's not even something to clap for, because, people run for office for different reasons, right? Some people, it's not realistic when you're talking about trying to get into office to make a change and to make an impact. For some people, it's to raise their profile. For some people, it's relevance. It's a resume thing, former presidential candidate. People have very many reasons. Some people are running for office to raise money. People milk the political system for what it is. So people have different reasons for running for office. The reason I am running for office is because I have a genuine burden and a desire to serve my people, to lead by example, to provide solutions, to do whatever I can do to be a part of the change that I seek in my country. Now, when the dust settled from 2019, I had to make this decision. Do I continue this kind of independent route, or do I look at the political landscape and say, they say politics is local. So from my local political landscape, kind of similar to what Sheyi was saying, looking at it and saying strategically, where can I get in, still stay true to who I am, fight for the things I believe in, but be part of the mainstream political structure that exists, so that the chances that I can actually get into office and find like minds who are doing the same to work together for the things that we want to see are real, as opposed to just being this person that's forever kind of shouting from the outside. One of the things that I said when I announced my intention to run this time is that we must engage with Nigeria where it is, not where we want it to be. And I'll just let that sink in. You can think about that later. But in looking at that and learning the lessons from that, I looked at, the landscape locally, and I said, at least in Lagos, as far as Lagos is concerned, I have 2 main choices. One of them is really more of a dictatorship than a democracy. One of them is a true democracy. And when I sat down with the leaders, they said, we like you, fantastic that you are coming here, you are great for the party, but please go and do the work in your ward, because nobody can impose you on your people. You have to go to your constituency, you have to meet with them, you have to rally that support. Whereas the other one in the local Lagos landscape is Baba Sokwe politics. If Baba says that, then that's the way that it goes. So for me, that choice was very simple, to say, I want to go somewhere where, I believe that leadership, or the opportunity to lead and the opportunity to serve, is something that you should earn. It's not something that should be imposed. It should be the will of, that's why we call it a democracy. It should be the will of the people that prevails. And so that's what informed my choice. Also, to be fair, INEC made it easy because of the 96 political parties that were in existence in 2019. They deregistered most of them. I think now we're down to 18, which I thought was good. I know some people are not happy about it, and I'm not trying to invalidate that, because one time I said it and somebody called me from a small party that was upset. It's a story for another day. Anyway, back to what you were saying. Yeah. Now, there's 2 things that I think we need to make clear. If you are talking politics, it's important to understand politics and not to just make blanket assumptions or blanket statements.
So let me just ask the question of your number. So you're not tainted by associating yourself? Because I'm sure for those who even go on Admiralty when you see him in the same pose as somebody else, if you're not in that way inclined, you think that this man has gone to dine with these.
So here's, let me answer that. Young people. Let me answer that. Is there any church that you can vouch for 100% of the people there? Is there any mosque Is there any company? Is there any organization? Is there any family that you don't have one or two people that have brain touch? I mean, let's be real with ourselves. I think we need to get off this soapbox mentality that we have. See, if you are sitting down saying that an entire organization of people are all bad, you are at best being unfair and ignorant.
So you're asking
if you are
to vote for the person.
if you are also assuming that an entire organization of people is all good, you are also being a bit ignorant, because we are human beings. You will never find a perfect collection of people on the face of the. You won't find it in the Bible. Some of the people that we draw faith and inspiration from in scripture are very flawed individuals, people that made very bad decisions. Now, because I'm a Christian, it's easier for me to use scriptural examples, but please, if you're a Muslim, I think it still applies. In fact, it does still apply. Now, let me ask you this. If Esther does not go into the palace with the king, don't the Jews die? If Daniel is not serving in Babylon, doesn't it affect the plight of the Jews? If Joseph is not second in command to Pharaoh, what happens to the people of God? So we need to understand that God intentionally puts light in dark places. That's the purpose of light. It's not to be shining on other light bulbs and be in church or in the mosque just praying into each other's face. No. The purpose, the reason God makes light is so that he can put you in a dark room and start to change the circumstances in that room. So I tell people, I'm not in the PDP to defend everything wrong that has ever been done in the history of the party. I'm not here to defend the history. I'm here to redefine and reform the future by the grace of God, in the capacity that he's given me, with the level of influence that I have in my part, is to start to say, we're going to do this thing differently. Now, this is the other thing though. Understanding politics. Do you know that no candidate owns the seat that they run on? Not one. When you go there on election day, you won't see my face or my name. You will see the logo of the political party. That means the candidate has to understand that in coming to a party, you're a party man. So there are decisions. You're going to have to go with the decision of the party. You're going to have to pull for the party. You're going to have to work for the party. Because at the end of the day, don't forget, the entire goal of this thing is for us to get into government and change it from the inside, like my brother was doing. But if you go and, so it's a thin line that you have to walk. And so we pray for grace and we pray for wisdom.
All right.
But sorry, let me just land by saying this. If you do not use the wisdom from God on how to navigate and live in these spaces, you can actually get kicked out and lose the seat that you are even fighting for in the first place. So people need to understand that. That is why it comes back to what Sheyi was saying about getting good people inside of political parties. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates select so that citizens can elect. I say it again, delegates select so that citizens can elect. I asked us how many of us here are members of a political party. We had 2 people. But yet, the congresses will happen. Leadership will be decided. Positions will be filled. And then we'll be frustrated by the caliber of candidates that end up on election day when we didn't play a part in the process. So, more good people in dark spaces.
We don't have time to.
God bless you. Thank you. I'm so sorry, my sister.
It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I mean, I hope Dr. Longe was aware that when you were inviting people here, they're politicians. And to be honest, it has been very, very instructive. So it's been, your passion is clear, and beyond your passion is also your knowledge. And I believe that more Nigerians need to hear things. It's amazing the amount of misinformation or uneducated electorate, the kind of education that we don't know these things. We just go there, we sit down, armchair analysis, oh, they're all bad. PDP, he has changed. He's now evil. APC, they are now old. So it is good for us to have conversations like that. So I hope that we are engaging with this. So, and that's why, Honorable Sheyi, and this will be, I'll do final questions for you because of the next panel. And so the next one I'll be speaking to you about, whilst you think about it, would be around, I'll come to you. Just 1 second. But I wanted to ask you about the, number one, the voter education, and then beavers. I need you to clear that, because the first on voter education as to what is required constitutionally to be the president of the Republic of Nigeria? What is required constitutionally to be the governor of a state? Because sometimes there are agitations when results come out that, this is cheating. You know, we had a situation in the US with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. By popular votes, she won, but by electoral votes, he won. And even though our system is not exactly like theirs, we operate a similar one in terms of it's not just about popular votes. It's not about who won the highest number of votes or the lowest number of votes. There are things to put into consideration so that when we're voting, we understand. Then the second part, and this is where I would want Mr. Wellington to also speak to, is beavers. We get a number of questions from on the show we do, and one of the questions that someone had sent was, oh, they're going to cheat. You know, somebody is going to send vote buying. They're going to register 500 and something people. But BVAS, that's bimodal voter accreditation system. BVAS has changed the game in terms of the way that voters are going to be accredited and will minimize incidents of overvoting or duplicating of votes or just marking numbers for people. I want you to explain to people who are watching.
Okay, so voter education, I believe very strongly, and this is one of the things we're trying to do now, is take it into the school system, is that we need to understand what our Constitution says and the Electoral Act. Those are the two main, if you like, laws to look at. For the president, you need a majority, and it needs to have at least 25% into third states. I think that's 24 states. Yes, including FCA. So if what that just means is even if you're majority, but you don't have 25% into thirds, that means you haven't made the cut. America has its own laws, and that's why the whole electoral college and all of that works over there.
So to break it down, your favorite candidate can come up with the highest number of votes, yes. But if it's all from the south,
yes,
he cannot win, or she cannot win.
Yes, because it's not 24 states. Yes.
Okay. So so they just consent. So you might have all the 7 million votes in Lagos and then 0 votes in some parts. That's what I was trying to explain.
Absolutely. It has to be a spread. You're not going to be president of Lagos. You're president of Nigeria. So we want to make sure that you have that majority spread across the country. That's the thinking of the those that drafted the Constitution. Obviously, we've not really come across that before. Maybe this is the first time we're actually having more than 2 persons that have a realistic chance of winning.
More than 3 people.
Okay. Can be 4, can be 5.
I just wanted to clarify. We have 3 frontliners. Well, okay. Yes, go on.
All right. So, and that's why it is an interesting election, and we're all looking forward to it. For the governors, the Constitution again determines it's a majority. 51%. A simple majority would do that. So I believe very strongly that we need to start to take this into our schools. We need to start to take it into, organizations. It's not an election thing. It's a nation building thing. It's your nation. You need to understand how these things work. I've been to several fora where I'm speaking, and then they're shouting, and I'm trying to explain. It's more than this, what you guys are saying. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of zeal, but not enough knowledge. All right? So, we won't agree, but we have to add knowledge. We have to add knowledge to it. So, voter education is important. It's not just during elections, that people should understand. Ask in any audience, how many of you know who your honorable member is? How many of you know who your local government champion? People don't know. I say it everywhere I go. I'm a member of parliament in Oyo State. I rarely get citizens engage me.
So let me pause there and ask you, because this is where people who are not on the ballot get to be a part of the process.
Yes.
You say that, how many people did you consult with when you were as honorable member?
How many people did
you consult your constituents? How many people came up to you during your time this season? Like, I have an issue.
So I have loads, but they are mainly politicians.
No, whilst he was in office, because he's representing the people.
Yes.
So he should hold constituents meetings.
So
how many people came to those meetings?
What I have done is go to them. And people will say, when you're looking for votes, were you not going to them? Yeah. It's an easy argument to make. The fact is that we have to move away from is their thing to is our thing. It's our nation, it's our country. So even if he's not coming, we will go. You can't sit on that seat. It's because of us you are there. And until people have that shift in mindset and understand that, look, you are sitting there on our own choice. And if you don't do well, we'll take you out. So people have to get to that stage. So, I mean, what happened was I have a constituency office. I go back home every Wednesdays. And people knew. But then after about 3 months, I said this is not sustainable because only politicians were coming and they were coming only to collect things. All right? And I started to think that this wasn't the plan. So I'm not only representing politicians, I'm representing students, I'm representing religious leaders, I'm representing traditional rulers, I'm representing the business community.
So why were they not coming?
Because they already have this mindset block. Those people are bad people. We don't want them. They are not, there's this, yes, there's distrust between citizens and government. And it's not just a Nigerian thing. All right? But that mindset makes them just, they will do whatever they want to do. But we have technology, we have media to call people out, to make people accountable. But we just are not looking in that direction. And so I started so when I realized that if I sit, they just come and I now started organizing breakfast meetings with the business community. Then I'll have like a town hall with the students community. Then I'll go into this community. So I was now having to go to them. If I want to make a motion on entrepreneurship, then I'll call entrepreneurs. What are your problems? What are you guys facing? And then go to the floor of the house to represent them properly. But they weren't coming. All right. So I think that divide is there and we need to get it out of the way. So yes, you vote, but it doesn't end there. All right. So after this guy is in office, whoever is in office, whether you're candidate or not, he's representing you. All right. So it doesn't matter because you might say, is this party? So no, he's there on your account. All right. And and at the legislative, they say we have 3 main functions: to make laws, to oversight the executive, i.e. when we pass a budget and they're spending money, we need to be checking that what they're spending is what we approved. All right, so that's the second thing. And the third thing is representation. And so representation is saying, if my people have problem, I must be able to speak on their behalf. All right, so those are our 3 main responsibilities as legislators. So I just realized that, is it only the political class and I already know what they're looking for, but I need to be able to do more than that. So I took it on myself to go to them, and it shouldn't be just one way. It should be a 2-way thing. So we need to educate people that is much more than voting. There's a lot more you need to engage. Some of the programs we're doing now, we're getting students to write letters to their counselors. We're getting students to write letters to their local government chairman so that they understand that even from a young age, we can engage them. They're there because of us. Brilliant. That's why these guys are there. Brilliant. So we need to do that whole revamping. It's a reorientation thing. It will take some time, but we need to start early.
Very quickly, 1 minute on beavers. Just explain the process.
All right. So what beavers is, and I think a big credit to President Buhari for really standing on this. So it's a 2-step. So it's either your fingerprints or your face. One of the 2 of them must work. All right. And what he's saying is that you cannot, back in the days, you accredit, go home, then come back and vote. There is no need for all of that. You vote, you accredit, you vote, and everything at the end will be transmitted automatically. So there is no, like during my elections, the guy that was collating said, there are too many people here. I don't feel safe. I'm going to go and collate in the local government. I said, you are not going anywhere. You are going to collate that thing here. You all right? Because on the way, something will happen. All right? So I said, you're collating that thing here. So, that's what Beavers has come to do. It's a double check, if you like, to ensure that the person that is being accredited is the one voting. And the risk, which we should say, is sometimes if it doesn't start at 0 and it starts at 10 or 20, that means it's been added on. And then they look for ways to add people to make that 20 votes or that 50 votes. So obviously, candidates must ensure that their agents are on top of things and make sure that when the beavers is brought forward, it is on 0, it is clean, and then, the right
people can do that too as well.
Yes.
This is why it's important to understand this. So when you're voting, you have to ensure that it's on 0. Now, like you said, we are no longer leaving things, thank you, to politicians alone or agents. Yes. We are protecting our votes. Absolutely. This is our responsibility. This is a fight to the finish by the grace of God. And so finally, Mr. Wellington, I'd just like to ask you, I don't know if you have any comments on beavers. Honorable Sheyi has done a great job describing it, but I like what he said about representation. How many of us in the audience and those who are online know where their representatives' office is? How many of us know the days they have engagement with their constituents? How many of us have ever gone to a town hall meeting, aside from this one? You see the beginning of the problem. Many of us don't even know the office. We don't even know who is the current chairman of Etiosa local government. Chairman, not representative. And we concentrate on the presidency a lot. Who is president? What is he doing? He's so far away from us. But the people like Honorable Sheyi, who even want to engage with you, you are nowhere to be engaged. So these are critical things that we talk about, that even if your name is not on the ballot, you must begin to change so that you're a part of the process in terms of changing this nation. And so that's why I'm going to pose this final question to you, Honorable Wellington. If you do become the representative of Etiosa, what are the ways you would employ to engage the people? How would you ensure, because you're not there for the PDP, yes, you're on the ballot of the PDP, and they can take you out, like you said, but the true people who have the power, the office of the citizen is the most powerful office in the land. And so the people who should have the right to take you in or take you out should be the people. So how are you going to ensure that you serve these people who are putting you in?
Thank you for that question. Now, I think the first thing that I think is important is to pay attention to how somebody gets into office. I think it's extremely important. What do I mean? If you have a representative that, one, does not need to win his primaries to get the ticket, just needs to go and talk to one godfather somewhere to say, oh yeah, give him the ticket. In my own opponent's case, he didn't win the primaries this year. He didn't win the primaries in 2019.
Leave your opponent.
So what am I saying? For somebody like that, who does that person become accountable to? Is it you? He's accountable to Baba Sokpe politics. And the problem is that we've allowed Baba Sokpe candidates for far too long. They feel entitled to your government. They feel entitled to being leader in positions of leadership. They feel like it's an inheritance or an entitlement or something their father or a godfather or somebody gave them, because that's who ensures that they always get there, which goes back to the conversation that we were just having about getting people involved in the political system. Now, on the flip side, look at me, for example. For people who were following my primaries, you know that I ran. I worked all year. Primaries came. In fact, we were so confident that we were going to win our primaries because of the work that we had done, that when the primaries came around, the votes were, I think there were 31 approved delegates. We won 28-3. But we were not surprised by that. It was about what we expected. Except that the next day, there was a document that came out and said that we lost. So we had to go through the process. Remember I said you engage with Nigeria where it is, right? So you either give up and throw in the towel or you fight. And that's what fighting looks like. So we fought and we appealed and there was a committee and all of that, only for them to say, you know what, go and do the primaries again. Not just you, but everybody in Lagos State. We went through it the second time. We won again a second time. Why? Because the people decided that they wanted us to have this ticket. So, the people have to decide who their representatives should be. Because it is the way that you get into office that you are accountable to. That's right. So, you can't be the people's choice, then turn around and turn your back on the same people that put you in office. Yeah. Because guess what? Thank God it's not a permanent job. 4 years will come. You understand? You will still come back to those same people and say, please, oh, this is my report card, or this is what I've done. So when you want to talk about accountability, be involved in the first place. Be involved in the person's approach. Be involved in the person's access to government. Because that person knows that if not for you guys, there's no way this thing would have been possible. So he knows that he answers to the way that he got into power. Now, for me specifically, my entire political career only exists because of the will of the people, because of the grace of God and the will of the people. So, I went for a candidate's town hall, sitting representative's town hall last year. It was his third town hall in almost 4 years. This same representative had only tabled 3 bills in 4 years. Why? Because he was a Baba Sokpe candidate. So he doesn't feel the need to organize a town hall. He doesn't feel the need to do what my brother is doing, which is having breakfast and brunches with the business community and a town hall with the students. So those are the kinds of things that we're putting in place. We have a constituency office right now that people can come to right here. I've done more town halls in the last 4 or 5 months than some candidates have done in the last 4 years, because to me the pulse of the people is important, because they're the ones that I'm accountable to. So that will continue in terms of engaging with the people, listening to the people, giving them a platform. And thank God in these days of virtual meetings, there's so much more that you can achieve than just physical meetings. You can have Zoom, you can have Google Meets, you can meet people in different groups. It's yours. We were doing a thing called Cocktails and Conversations every Thursday for 4 or 5 months. And it was just different groups of people in the business community, because this is the headquarters.
Do they have their PVCs?
Not all of them, unfortunately.
Because that's so important.
But that's what I think that's what the job of a representative should be. So I applaud Sheyi, because that's what it's about. It's about if they're, see, the system is not good enough to police people that you've put in power. So you must elect people who will police themselves, who will make them. I mean, he said it right here that people were not coming to see him. So what did he do? He started going out to say, oh, yeah, let me sit down with you. Entrepreneurs, how far? Students, how far? There's a will, a political will there to say, I must talk to these people, I must engage with them. They're the reason that I'm here.
Right.
But if you don't put in somebody who has that mindset, you'll never get that kind of accountability.
All right. Thank you so much. So, in 3 ways, you did mention, how will you engage with the people?
Town halls.
Town halls.
My constituency office.
Okay.
And then
many. Would you have a website?
Oh yeah, so there's a website right now.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be the third one, online. So whether it's through the website, whether it's through social media, my social media, the social media of my office, I only survive in politics because of the people. So I don't have a choice but to engage.
All right. Thank you so very much. I'm sure you'd agree with me that we could be here longer to just have conversations around, why your vote is important, why your PVC, why using your PVC is important, why you must be out there. The truth is that if you're not involved in employing a person, then the person has no responsibility to giving you reports or trying to win your favor so that you can put them back into power. And so your vote is literally your power and your tool to transforming this nation. I'd like to thank very much Honorable Sheyi Adisa and of course Mr. Bankole Wellington for sitting on this panel this evening. Please, a round of applause for them. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are fully out of time. Oh, we have a time for question and answer. So may I suggest that you write your question and then we'll take all of them at the same time. But we'll do the panels first, and then afterwards we'll come together for questions. If that's okay. Thank you. But please write it down. Write your... Pardon? Thanks. So please write your question down so that you won't forget it, because it's really important. Thank you, because it's a town hall, so we want to get your questions too. conversation was 4 years ago, wasn't it? 2019 election, we all came together like this, we were talking about it, then we wait for the next 4 years and we come and talk about it again, and we do that cycle by cycle. But we want to talk about beyond elections, the need for active citizenry. And to join me on this panel to talk about this, I'd like to invite two people. I'm happy to be having another lady, a woman lady join me on stage, and she's one who's very passionate about getting the involvement of women and men in the electoral process in Nigeria. Currently, she's the founder of Women in Leadership Advancement Network. Please let's make very welcome Mrs. Abosede George Organ. You're welcome. Thank you very much. And joining us on the panel as well is a man whose passion for building Nigeria is palpable. I'm sure you'd feel it in the next few minutes as we speak and we discuss, have this conversation around active citizenry. He's no stranger to many of us. He's also very politically inclined. He is the chairman of a new alliance. Let me not make an error with that. Alliance for a New Nigeria, that's it, ANN, Alliance for a New Nigeria, and also founder of Project ARC. He's on a number of projects, very long CV. Please let's make very welcome Pastor Mr. Emmanuel Daniel, because I don't know if he's coming tonight, in the office of a pastor or a Mr. But how many of us see that in Nigerian politics, they go and dig out their titles? So I see in some party, then see Reverend. I'm like, are you a Reverend too? Didn't realize that you're a pastor, particularly when he favors them. But I mean, thank you so much, Pastor Emmanuel, the PED, as you're fondly called, and Mrs. Abosede George Organ. I'll just quickly, for the sake of introduction, talk about what active citizenship is. Just a line, and then I'll ask you to open up. So, active citizenship is being a part of participation that requires respect for others. It's used to highlight the participation that can lead or be a part of non-democratic activities that can create harm and promote the progress of a nation. And so for us as Nigerians, what we're pushing for at this time is for every one of us as citizens to actively be involved in the change that we seek. How many of us seek a new Nigeria? I think, okay, maybe apart from one or two people, I think we like the status quo. How many of us are ready to make that move and make that sacrifice to see that change we're looking for? Okay, almost everyone. If you're online, please raise your hand in the comment section too, so we can know who is for us or who is against us. So the first, I know some people are just here as observers to know whether they want to jackbar or just, watching on the sidelines. I really want to be a part of this building a new nation because I'm really tired of this. But let me start off with where we ended the first panel in terms of, Honorable Sheyi Adisa started and then Mr. Wellington spoke about it in terms of beyond the elections. So we've talked about the importance of voting, why it's important to go out there and exercise your civic duty, civic responsibility. But how important is it, beyond your vote, to take part, ensure that you're a part of this process? I'd like you to share, and then if you can also expound a bit in terms of how do you class this? What are examples of being an active citizen? I'll start with you, Mrs. George Organ.
Thank you very much, and I'm really grateful to be here this evening, and thank you to Esther and the team for the platform. So, to be honest, election and everything that, Honorable Sheyi and Mr. Wellington spoke about is the process to something. Right? And ideally, it's governance. So, unfortunately, it doesn't end when the people get elected. It actually starts. And I really like the analogy that, as the electorate, we are employing people who are going to represent us. So it's a job, right? And they're supposed to be working. And so the process of starting to track their KPIs, right? Their key performance indicators actually starts when they're sworn in. And I think that that's really important because, if we see it as an end, it's not an end. It's just a process that leads to people then governing us, right? And I think that understanding is where it starts. So let's go to the basics. If you ask any Nigerian what their issues are, why are people jackpotting? Security will be at the top of that list, right? So that's definitely something. Unemployment for a lot of young people and access to jobs or economic opportunities generally. Now, the question is, are the people you are voting, well, in the voting phase, are they capable, are they competent, and have they demonstrated to you, whether it's through their manifesto, that they're going to solve your problems? And I think that that's where it starts, because you can't hold people accountable for things that you don't even know. Because, and why this is important is, the legislature makes laws, for example. So you know how we blame the president for everything? There are some things that is not the president that does. Similarly, there are some things that is not your legislator that you should be going to for. So even understanding who you should hold accountable for what, I think is very, very critical. Let's use education, for example. Education is not federal government. It's your, especially basic education. It's the state government. And so I think that the first step to holding our leaders accountable beyond the election is understanding what those leaders are supposed to do for us. And then I think we can go further to talk about other things, because there's evidence that shows us, and let me just use one indicator point. The Corruption Perception Index that's usually published by Transparency International came out recently. Nigeria was right down there, all right, amongst other, like, Nigeria is like women's representation. Nigeria is slightly higher by, I mean, the countries that we do better than are often war-torn countries. That's who we compare with, oftentimes, right? But the evidence shows us that a more inclusive government would most likely lead to a country that has, right, a lower corruption perception index. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So there's certain things, so all of us that if I ask you, do you want us to eradicate corruption, we'll say yes. But do you want an inclusive society? Are you voting for a candidate who has shown and demonstrated that they're committed to inclusion? That's a totally different matter. So I'm just trying to point that oftentimes we are making choices about the things that affect our future. And I think understanding that is really critical. And then I hope we can come back to one more point, which is that you can recall the people that represent you.
That's a conversation we never talk about. It's as if it is, let's just manage to do
bad as the bad.
Yes. Let's just manage. When we start that process, it's a never-ending journey. I was just trying to get the statistics. So Nigeria ranked 154 out of 180 countries. We dropped 5 points. So we are getting worse and worse. Now, as Mrs. George Ogan was speaking, I just wanted to ask, how many of us know or have read the manifestos of the candidates we're supporting? Sincerely. No, you're not allowed, for those who are sitting in front. Because really and truly, we don't know. It's only what the news or what they say on campaign grounds. In fact, the only thing sometimes we pay attention to are the gaffes on campaign grounds. So we don't pay attention to the issues, or when they are fighting against each other and saying, you did not do this, you are a thief, you be thief, I don't be thief, you be bigger thief, I don't be. That's the only thing we're looking at. But we're not actually looking at what did they say they're going to do. How many of us know that the past government said they were going to give us 3 million jobs every year? Did they give us 3 million jobs? And for those who voted, I'm asking this because even if you decide to vote for them in the next election, you have to go back and say, but you said X, Y, Z. Are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? These are important things to know. So thank you for pointing that out. PD.
Thank you very much, Ayo, for having me, and also the convener for the 7,000 series. I also want to commend the previous panelist, Honorable Sheyi, and of course, Honorable Wellington. Yeah. And of course, my co-panelist. When I heard about this, the topic, you know, this got to the core of me, because sitting down and having conversations with politicians, so to speak, and listening to what we're hearing today from the panelists, it goes back to this. Mr. Wellington was saying that he was told, go back to your ward and start to work. Honorable Sheis, same thing. I go to my constituency. But this is the thing. We do not have a culture, right, where in wards you have town hall meetings. We have community halls that are built that only politicians go there to hold meetings. There's no culture that gets the community in itself to get there to have those conversations. So that's why you would never have them coming to you to come and speak to you, because they're not wired that way. So we need to understand something very quickly. Culture. And what kind of culture are we building? Because if we can begin from there, I think it would help us as to how we're going forward with what we want to see represented. So two individuals, and amongst them, of course, the gubernatorial candidate for Labour Party who's sitting with us here, is people have put themselves forward, which is, saying that we want to actively, as a citizen, commit ourselves into providing. But it goes beyond just making yourself comfort. That's number one. The question is, how connected are you with the constituency? What have you been doing in terms of impacting the community? How have they felt you? Because that's really what politics is about. It's about the chain all the way to the very top. At the point where you have the congresses, just like Honorable Sheyi had mentioned, the caliber of people who are at congresses are people that are known to the people. They're people who have affected them one way or another, right? But the people you see today are those who are funded by money bag politicians who on their own, right, help the people around them to settle bills here and there. But for citizens, we strongly believe that election is just it's an event, right? It's an event, and it comes every 4 years. But there's much more. The question is, how do we take responsibility for our community? How do we say actively, as a citizen, there are things that I see every day that I do not like. What am I doing about it? You see, every time we look at the continent of Africa and Nigeria, and everybody talks about the woes in these countries, I've often said, wherever you have problems, the problems require solutions. If you can find solutions, you can offer service and you can create wealth. In other words, Africa, Nigeria is a nation sitting with great wealth if you can find solutions to the problem. So we need to start to educate young people to understand that the key to growing wealth is this. The key to growing wealth is having clear understanding as to how we need to be able to build from the bottom up. So how do you respond to the things that you're burdened about? I have problems with roads in my street. What am I doing about it? I have problems with drainage around me. What am I doing about it? And you see, before social media, we've always felt very, very restricted in terms of how do we raise funds? How do we generate income? Yeah. But that has shifted. A lot has shifted. The young people today are generating income very easily. Now, you know that if you came up with a project in your community and you start well, and you start putting what you're doing up on your social media feed, you would find people who would donate to that particular cause. As long as you can show credibility, you can show transparency, you would have people who would donate towards that. And then it grows. As it's growing, you're having people partner with you either by donating or serving or volunteering with you. But what you're doing is that you're finding solutions to these problems at the grassroots level. So I believe that that is where it starts. And I think as we continue, I'll be able to expand it a bit more as to what we've been doing and how we've seen the impacts that we're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think that's brilliant. Please, a round of applause for our two panelists thus far. Okay, so I'm glad that you've PED stopped at now being very, you're breaking it down in terms of bringing it back home as to how you yourself, I know you both lead active, citizenship organization where people are more involved. During your introduction, I talked about how you work with women. You're very passionate about, I know your work with Electa, trying to get more women on board, get more women in politics. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, beyond politics, even in terms of shows, I work on a politics show, we only have men as resource people. In fact, I heard once that when we want to invite some women to come on the show, they don't want to be a part of, they don't want to. How do we get the minority groups? So not just, unfortunately in this instance, even though we're not in the minority, because our numbers are huge, when it's election time, we're there to sing and dance, but we don't participate, even in calling, even in accountability. Because in speaking up, it's the men. You often see the men. People living with disability. For the first time this cycle, INEC released the figures of the number of people, about 85,000 people living with disability are going to be voting in this election. Do we hear their voices? Do they feel disempowered to even be a part of the process? How can we get more people, and what's the importance of having these minor groups be a part of this process?
Thank you for that question. So, ideally, any political system should be a representation of the people that it represents. And I think that that's just like the basics, right? So in Nigeria today, you have women, men, and persons with disabilities. And ideally, our government should be a representation of that. But in terms of what things look like today, right? So at the Senate, you have 109 seats, right? At the Senate. And we only have 7 women. And then we have 1 person with disability represented at the Senate. And so when we were all screaming, when the 5 gender bills were thrown away, we can't be screaming because the people there don't understand what you're talking about. They don't understand that as a woman, you want to marry a man and give him citizenship. Why? I don't know. Me, as a man, I can already do it, so I don't really know why you're clamoring for it. You want additional seats. Why? We're all men here. We're okay. We don't want to change the status quo. Why are you coming to shake things up? So and that's the reality of understanding this thing. Now, House of Representatives, we have 360 seats. There are 11 women. What are they going to change? What motion? How can 11 of them convince, because there are laws too, you have to move, to pass a bill, you have to be a certain number. How are the 11 of them going to convince the people that they want to come on board as allies? And similarly, in the House of Reps as well, there is only 1 person with disability. There were 2, and I think we lost 1. So I'm saying this because it still starts from the process that I think the previous panelists talked about. It's about how inclusive the political parties are. And you know, it's interesting because a lot of the political parties actually have gender quotas and quotas for persons with disability. But I think that is where the disenfranchisement starts. And so unfortunate, because if you don't put them in your leadership in the political party, again, the woman gets the token woman leader position. Why? Right? So I'm just saying that it really, really starts from looking in the mirror and saying, do these people represent the people on the other side? Because as you said, women make up 49% of this country. In the last election, 47% of the voters were women. I think that's interesting as well, because that means women are voting men in. But again, it's because the funnel really thins out. So as at today, if you look at the statistics of the women who are candidates, right, across board, I think it's like something around 16%. So how many are going to end up being elected? We're going to end up where we are, around 4.1%. So it's a lot of the things that the previous speakers talked about, where we need to be part of the participation across the value chain, right? Because that's how we increase our chances. But again, in terms of persons with disabilities, it has to be people who look like them, who understand the peculiarities of their issues, and which again, I will commend the Electoral Act, because there are now so many inclusive clauses in this particular Electoral Act. For example, if you go to a polling unit, they're supposed to have separate lines for persons with disability. If you are visually impaired, you can actually bring somebody who you've obviously indicated ahead would be your the person that helps you or guides you. So because it is their fundamental right as well to vote, and beyond that, but the point I'm making is, if they're not there, then it's harder for a person with disability to go and meet an able-bodied representative and say, fight for my cause. Do you see? Yeah. So that is the first step. The first step is ensuring that we have people who are representative of society. And then in terms of the other things around these marginalized groups, and I think young people are also in marginalized groups, even though not too young to run, yes. The bill was passed, but it hasn't actually translated like significantly in more young people getting, progress. But we have made good progress. Now, there are systemic barriers, and I think we know what those barriers are. We were talking about violence earlier. We're talking about money politics, which, again, I think this Electoral Act to a certain degree addresses, right? So there are real systemic barriers to why these marginalized groups continue to be marginalized.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks. I'd like to ask you, PD, now this time coming to the Office of the Citizen. When we talk about the Office of the Citizen, we often, make the noise about it's the most powerful office. But in Nigeria, it's not the reality. It's perhaps the weakest office in the land. And one of the reasons is because the officer does not even understand that he has powers, he or she has powers. Talk about the Office of the Citizen. When in the last panel, we spoke about one of the things they can do in terms of holding elected officials to account. But beyond that, when we complain about the nation or the state of the nation, we often point fingers at politicians. Yet, it is said that the leadership of a nation is a reflection of its people. So when you go there, or what you see on ground is what you're probably going to do when you go there. For instance, who litters the road? Is it the president? Who disobeys traffic lights? Is it Governor Sanwo-Olu? So what can we do as the office, because for every office there's a responsibility. What are the responsibilities of the Office of the Citizen?
Thank you for asking that question. Let me just take from what the co-panelists, where she, the inclusiveness, those who, the women folks, people with disability. No matter how we want to cut this, we would not find ourselves achieving the desired purpose. Women are not going to be giving on a platter of gold what they want in the political space. They have to work their socks off. People of disability have to do the same thing. And what does that mean? It means that women, everyone has to be actively involved in community engagement. It is important that you see, that's where influence comes. When you're touching lives, you're influencing people. When you're influencing people, then you can channel and show them the path in which to go. We are addressing this issue, from midsection up. We need to start from the basics, meaning that for every woman in Nigeria, how many of them are going down, rolling their sleeves, saying there's certain things within my community that I can give back. There's certain things I can do actively.
We do it informally.
That's my point. So I'll give an example of what we've done. So in 2019, as a political party, one of the key things that we wanted to do in 2019 was very clear, that we wanted to be able to show that young people could be involved in politics. Fela Durotoye was the presidential candidate. I was the national chairman of that. But the idea was to get people to understand, young people to understand, that it was possible for you to get involved in politics, and it was possible for you to be able to do politics in a very clean and decent manner. And that we did. The next thing was, of course, political parties were proscribed. Where's Mr. Wellington? I hope he's in the room. And my political party was one of those that fell under that. But that was simply because they thought that the political party itself was the beginning and the end. No, it wasn't. The political party for us was an opportunity to be able to say to ourselves, it was use the election, show forth that these kind of people exist, they can do things differently. But once that was prescribed, it didn't stop us because we already knew where we were going. That it wasn't about the platform in itself, it was how do we build a people that are actively involved. And this is the thing that we miss. Now, we have a lot of NGOs in Nigeria, people doing good works, but they do it just simply because that's what they want to do. So we started to engage each and every one of them and saying, how do we collaborate with you in what you're doing? How do we replicate what you've done so well in Kaduna State and take it to Benin? How do we replicate what you're doing here and take it to another city? And we started saying to ourselves, become more involved, and started shifting and educating them that with the level of influence you have, start getting yourself involved with what's happening at your ward level, what's happening at the political party level. Start getting yourself, because the people know you. The people know you, but when it's election time, they don't see you on the ballot. So who do they go to? They go back to the politicians. So we're saying take advantage of what you already have in terms of influence and the lives that you're touching, and begin to build a community out of it. And in that place, you start having the kind of influence that is required for you to start moving yourself into ward levels and moving yourself all the way down to Congress. Because as you do so, what you're showing every day is I'm actively involved in this community. I am actively doing what I'm doing. And then you command the kind of influence that it is. Because at that point, it is the people who are saying they want you, not the godfathers who are saying so. And the people know that they have strength to have put you there, and because they know they put you there, they can wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, we want to call you back. But for people who never had that influence in the first place, who are bought over, will never have the opportunity or the power to call you back from office.
Yeah.
And so that's where we are.
So tell us, in terms of, because in Nigeria, unfortunately, a number of people are not aware or perhaps conscious of being active citizens, because we are very used to blaming the political powers or political powers for the states we are in and the problems that we are in. I'd like you to break it down for us. So for both of Mrs. George Organ and PED, in terms of what can we begin to do, because we're changing the narrative. We are no longer going to be passive in nation building. We may not all be on the ballot boxes, but we also recognize the fact that each person, each citizen has a role to play. For instance, the American dream and that pride of being American and wanting to do things because this is my nation, that feeling or sense of ownership that this is my country. If you break the law, it is our collective responsibility. If you dirty the streets, if you litter the beach, if you litter the water, it's going to get clogged up, and we are all going to face the consequences. We're not just going to wait the government to come and do these little things for us. Because I'm hoping that at the end of this panel, we'll think about it and begin to make personal commitments beyond election. Yes, one of it is voting, choosing good candidates, but what can we do? I love that you talked about community involvement. How can we become more involved in our community? What are practical ways for us to become active citizens in Nigeria for a better nation? We'll end on that because of our time, and then before we go to Q&A afterwards.
I think the first thing we should start with is the schools, the younger ones. And we always think that we have to get things like this in the curriculum. No. They're extracurriculum things. They're clubs. You can actually have a club on nation building and quietly sign up young people into it. I recall about 15 years ago, we started something that's called Servant Leaders at a school. It was a club that just had 1 or 2 or 3 other students that were in. Less than a year, it became the most sought after club, because they could literally see, parents could see the transformation of their children and what they've turned out to be just by what we were educating them. So this club has very strong influence. We have to start from the grassroots and begin to pull those things all the way. And so for active citizens, it's a responsibility that if you've been given the opportunity or the privilege of education, you should give back. You see, it's all about giving back at different levels. You have to be actively involved in giving back in whatever it is that you can give back. Whether it's you helping to build school, whether it's you helping to create, but just ensure that you give back actively to the different groups of people within your community. And I think if we start to build that up gradually over time, when we started the political party, people says, it takes a while. And the first thing I said to them was, if we had done that 20 years ago, we won't be here now. So it doesn't matter how long it takes. Start it. So if we start there, and start to build that consciousness all the way up. You know, you start putting that in the minds of the young people already, you know, what the responsibilities are and what it is to be actively involved in how you shape your future. They can see it, and then you begin to go in that particular direction. Now, for the adults, again, we have a lot to do. We have, again, the educated must make sure that they try to educate the ones that are uneducated about basic things that they should understand. What are your rights? What are you supposed to be doing? You know, basic things. They're basic, they're not major things, but just ensure that you give them that, because the ones that are not educated are constantly looking up to supposedly middle-class elites. Yeah. And I must say this, that I think that in this nation, the elites have failed woefully in providing what is necessary for the generation that comes, because they look up to us. They look up to us for direction. All we sit down doing is speaking so much English and never getting the job done. Yeah. So we're saying get down to the point where you start doing things. You start making sure that the change you want to see begins with what you are giving and how you're plugging yourself into the community at the base.
Absolutely. I love the part you talk about education being key, and the fact that you can actually start clubs, begin to speak to the young people in your community as part of making them aware of their rights, responsibilities. Also, someone said giving back in your area of expertise. Excellent point. Thank you so much. Mr. George Ogan.
So I'm just going to piggyback on the last point he made around the elite. So the evidence shows that in many societies where nations have transformed, there is often a collaboration between the elite and the masses. And actually, I think that the closest we've come to that was NSARS, right? It showed us and demonstrated what is possible when we do meet each other on certain issues. And so I think that, you know, that is a way that we can collaborate, you know, beyond elections. And I think that that's really important because, you know, sometimes I want to argue, so I know that the grassroots might be illiterate, but politically, oftentimes, they're more literate than the elites, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So I feel like, but they can't track, right? They can't track the budgets. Maybe they don't have access to track the budgets, right? So I think where the collaboration comes is for those of us who are educated, who have access to technology. So if you start to think about the things that made NSARS work, right? We should find ways to pass that same information to the grassroots. So what do I mean by that? If you can tell somebody who's actively, I mean, you know, in the most illiterate way, active politically or politically literate, and you tell them that your local government chairman gets 10 million naira every month, you know, and this is how he spends the money. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Then they start to say, but, you know, we can't see the schools. We don't see our healthcare getting better and all of that good stuff. So I think that there needs to be a collaboration between the elite and those of us who are educated and, you know, the greater population who are the masses. I think if we're able to do that, and by the way, there are organizations, and I'm using the budget specifically because that's where everything starts, right? I don't know if you noticed, but similar to what the previous panelists were saying, where if you do not vote, it's easier to rig. If you've ever been in government, and Honorable Sheyi will bear me witness with that for those of us who have been on the inside, for you to actually steal money, you need to spend it. That's the truth. And when I say you need to spend it, you actually need to have an authentic, valid line item, right? After working in government, it's actually really hard to steal. So you need to be really good to steal. Especially, you know, states like Lagos who actually have the laws. It's not easy to steal. You can't just lift the money, you know, and just direct it to your account. It doesn't happen like that. So you can imagine the power and the potential if you just tracked line items. And I think that's the kind of thing that things like people like Budget, Tracker are doing. And I'm saying that if citizens just paid more attention to where the money is going, what it's being used for, and just imagine if you who is focused on education, for example, only paid attention to the education budget, and you who's a security expert only paid attention to the security vote, you know, we could converge at some point and say, wait a minute, something's not adding up here. I think just even that, something as simple as that, and obviously, like I said, find a way to get that, you know, to the grassroots. I think that, you know, there's some transformation that could happen.
Let me just add real quick to what she mentioned. The likes of budget, right? What they're doing is fantastic, but the grassroots won't understand it. Somebody has to be able to break it down for them to see what this is about. And that's what we're talking about. That handshake between the grassroots and the elite, it's important. But there's such a divide. And as long as that divide exists, you would not be able to find what it is that you want to see, the kind of politics we want to see. So it's ensuring that we get people to get involved actively and make sure that this handshake is very, very possible and feasible.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure you'd agree with me that this panel has got us thinking, because you see just how uninvolved or detached we are from governance, except when it's the next election cycle. You know, I won't bother asking how many of us know the budget of our states. I won't bother asking. How many of us even know the budget that was recently passed and signed by the president for the Federal Republic of Nigeria? It just has trillions. Or you just know that the money they put for, we just know ways and means, ways and means. If I ask you what is ways and means, we don't know. How many, what's the percentage of, that was budgeted to education, to health, as against what we're using to pay for loans or to securitize the loans? You know, these are up there, like, please, 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 just tell me who is the bad guy. You're stealing my money. That's all we're thinking about. So I really love how we've ended this, that until we begin to see ourselves as an active part of society, the nation, and building the nation, we will continue coming back in this cycle every 4 years to decide only who is going to be, or like Mr. Wellington said, after they selected, we now do, okay, what do we have? What are the options that we have? And just, vote whichever one. Thank you all so much. I'd like to thank Mrs. George Organ and, of course, P. Deepas Emmanuel Daniel for speaking to us at this point. Please, a round of applause for this fantastic panel. Really got us thinking. I want to assume that the reason why this place is quiet is that you are thinking of your life. Like, what have I been doing as a Nigerian citizen? Okay, yes.
For this fantastic panel is dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about the role of the media in changing national narratives. First up is Chuka, also known as Xavier Obi, who is the director. Please give him a warm welcome. Director, Creativity and Innovation at Globacom. He's the advertising genius behind so many brands that we know. Some we love, some we don't love. He's the advertising genius behind them anyway. And he's also known and appreciated as a music critic and artist. And he's also known in the music industry as Dasuki, with albums called Coat of Arms and Black Godzilla under his belt. Welcome, Chuka. And next up is my brother and friend, Tochukwu McFoy, also known as Dr. Foy. Let's give him a warm welcome. He is a content development and entertainment project management professional with over 7 years experience in TV, advertising, marketing consulting, international cable networks, and the digital economy. Now, what's funny is he trained as a medical doctor, with his focus on mental health awareness. And yeah, it's just great to have both of you here on the panel tonight. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the role of the media in changing national narratives. Okay, where do we start? You know, who wants to go first in just talking about the power of media? First of all, I want this to be arguably the most educational panel that everyone here and everyone watching has ever watched. I want them to leave understanding the power of media much more than they ever have. So I'll start with you, Chuka, because you're acting like you don't want me to start with you. So I'll start with you. Let's talk about the power of media and how media influences minds and nations.
Okay, the biggest industry in terms of film in the world, if you're going to speak about a franchise, is the comic book franchise that has spawned so many Marvel movies. But they all started as propaganda. Superman started as propaganda. Captain America started as propaganda. These guys were created to boost morale during the World War for Americans. So they wanted to just portray the idea that America had super soldiers that was helping them win the war so people could feel better. Hollywood, as we know it, was set up for propaganda. And there's always going to be positive propaganda, always. Why is it important to have media speak in certain ways to build that propaganda? Because nationhood is a perception. That's what it is. It's just a perception. That's why nations can split. And then there's a nationhood again. If not, when you split, that should have been the end of the nationhood. But now you built that perception again as a separate country.
Right.
So that's what happens when people understand that if you use media right, you can decide how people see things. A small biblical example would be, okay, 10 spies go out into a country. They spy the land. So basically, those guys were basically media. So they went into those places, took photos, literally, but this time it was word of mouth, it was radio. So they came down, and then, talk about the place. Oh, it's amazing, it's a great land, it's everything. So imagine if the land they went to now was actually the north, for example. Right. And they get there and say, oh, the land is amazing, it's arable. If the land is like 5 times the size of Belgium. If that land is, if you need to see what you can build, what you can grow on that land. But then 10 of the guys you sent there to go and see the land and say, but if you see Boko Haram, we can't defeat them. It's not possible. You need to see the power they have, everything, and everybody starts wailing. But there are 2 guys that are like, bro, we saw them. Just give us those Super Tucanos. We're going to end them and we'll take our land and all that. All based on perception. But because the voices that were louder were the voices that said it was impossible to reclaim our land, that became the perception that prevailed in the minds of people. Nigeria's biggest issue is that I grew up in the 80s, and it was the military era. But even in the military era, as bad as it was, I remember on radio, there were always public service announcements. I remember them word for word till today. They're still trying in some ways to build that idea about Nigeria. They did it wrong, and the reason why they did it wrong was because they were saying these things for control as against for that nation mindset. And that's what has been missing for a country like Nigeria. When you see the flag, do you feel any sense of anything? I can say for certain that, because I've checked quite a lot of pledges and anthems, that Nigeria has one of the most powerful anthems ever. The second stanza of is nuts.
Absolutely
is nuts. And as a writer, is well written.
Yes.
There are rhyme schemes in those things, in those verses that are great.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even cause you to think. But you see other countries and you see how they treat, because you build the perception.
Absolutely.
We failed to build that perception, and that's what the media was meant to do. Orientation of the people determines what they feel about a country.
Absolutely.
That's the simple truth. And we have not had people, both on the private and the public space, that have said, now that we've been given this space, maybe we own this radio station, we own that station, we are going to put out information. But I'm not saying you should falsify anything or beautify anything beyond what it is. There are things that are true and real and pure and great about Nigeria. There are some amazing things about Nigeria. If you focused on that, there's a movie I'm trying to work on, and this is just the premise, simply. My dad fought in the war.
Okay.
He fought on the Biafran side. And there are so many parts of the story of what happened and how even the Nigerian and Biafran sides colluded to save each other. That nobody will talk about. Those are the kind of stories that will cause rifts to be fixed.
Yes.
You know, we run away from our problems. We just put the carpet over everything. And look at countries like South Africa. They have the Apartheid Museum.
Right.
You go to Rwanda, they have the Genocide Museum. Nigeria, don't speak about it.
We have the National Museum with the car there.
Exactly. We have the National Museum with the car.
With that one car.
Just imagine, with the car.
Is it still there?
It's still there.
Right.
With the car. We can become the people who know their history, know what went wrong. And because people haven't said it clearly, a lot of people have been able to misconstrue the events of the past to sell their own narrative, because if I don't tell my story, someone will.
Yeah.
So one day, you're going to see a movie about the Biafran War. Rick Ross will be Ojukwu.
Okay.
If you're lucky, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what happens when the media doesn't understand the gravity and the power that it wields, just like the Nigerian citizen doesn't either. So we have like two spectrums that need to be fixed.
Thank you so much for that. I'm still thinking of Rick Ross as Ojukwu. Like, that is just wild. But Dr. Foy, you know the power of media. We've had several conversations. But how would you how would you explain that power to people who have never taken the time to understand media as we want them to understand tonight?
Before I start, I'll just say Rick Ross as Ojukwu. Ibo Queno. Just, so I worked in MTV for about 3 years, and I was in South Africa, I was in Cape Town, I was here. And I spent half of the year last year outside trying to just learn about media. So I'll pick up from what he said. So there's a movie called How to Be a Tyrant. You should watch it. It's on Netflix. And they spoke about Idi Amin, they spoke about Adolf Hitler, Saddam Hussein. And they spoke about how they use media to hold, it's a beautiful movie, you should watch it, to hold the minds of people. So let's say propaganda is the first part, but what does it lead to? Agenda. So media is about agenda setting. But now, I think Nigeria has a chance, and I'll explain. In the past, media was owned by a few. And the few were called influencers. So I was in Hollywood last year, LA, and I went to do a course, and they said that Madeleine Albright, the former chief of staff, her job was Hollywood. The chief of staff, her job was Hollywood. She was the influencer. She was the one that gave rebates to some movies. Top Gun, years ago, the Tom Cruise Top Gun was funded by the American government. They were the influencers. So then, perception was, propaganda and agenda was from the top. But then Facebook came, and Instagram came, and TikTok has come, and ChatGPT would come, and what would happen is that influencers are now decentralized. So let nobody joke around with the future of propaganda and agenda. That's one. Two is that our brains have changed. 1,000 years ago, people needed the sun to check direction. They needed maps. Now, Chuka is sure of going to the mainland. Do you know why? Google Map. So his brain is now dependent on technology. So with technology and democratization of influencers, we have a chance to take back our narrative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You know, every time I have thought about Hollywood, I have just thought about how, let's say they got it right, you know, and hearing you say, I didn't even know that is in that piece of information about the government funding a movie, because in all the Hollywood films that we watched growing up, you know, the White House can never be taken, president can never die, actor no they die. They don't leave a soldier, no soldier left behind. Before you even want to attack a nation like that, you will think twice that all these things I'm watching, because they were feeding us with the absolute same thing.
Let me just
the
add
land
one
of
thing.
dreams.
Do you know that the flag in the movies, if you mess up in your movie with how they put the flag of USA, you're finished. I read the book. Even flagging.
Everything.
Everything.
It's so intentional. I remember the first time I went to New York, and I've said this story a few times. I was driving from the airport to Harlem, where I was staying, and the number of potholes that we entered, I was shocked. I was shocked. The rats in the subway, the stench, then even just the state of homelessness. You know, they do show homelessness, but it's glamorized. It's like, oh, the nice guy on the road, and then the main guy gives him some money and says, oh, thank you, it was so nice. You know, and I got there. I got into the pothole. It's the kind of thing you want to check your ticket. They drop me in. Am I in Zimbabwe? Sorry, no, I like Zimbabwe. Sorry, no disrespect to Zimbabwe. But yes, but they have sold that story. There are people right now that will never believe that anything bad can happen in America, because the stories always have a happy ending. Somebody's always rescued, all of that. So they were very intentional in the storytelling. And that's what media is. Media is literally the plural of mediums, different mediums, and then they are telling the story. And they agreed. Those early Hollywood people, they agreed on the kind of stories they were going to share. They sold those stories, and we're all waiting for our American visa dates. You know, we all want to go there, we all want to see it. So it's interesting. But yes, now I love the way you go, because the next thing on my list was to talk about the disenfranchisement of, or just how the dispersion of stories are now, or now is, you know, how the power of storytelling, in a much better way, is now in the hands of just different people. Remember, we're going somewhere, we're talking about the power of the media in changing the national narrative. Now, let's talk about how empowered we all are in telling different stories. Chuka.
Yeah, so I'll talk about it, but in context, obviously, of Nigeria.
Yes.
Yeah. You literally, we come from a storytelling country. That's a simple fact about Nigeria and Africa as a whole. Everything we were taught were usually true stories. It's not unusual for a country or for a people who, you know, you didn't come from a background of necessarily reading and writing as much as passing it down orally. So stories were the best way to encapsulate these things. Since we're from that background, right, all you have now is people who have always been ingrained in them the ability to tell stories, and they now have all the mediums to tell those stories in their hands, whether true or false, whether absolutely factual or slightly exaggerated in a way that just changes everything.
Inspired by a true story.
Thank you. Inspired by.
Yeah.
So we all have the power to. Sometimes a story, an entire story that can literally rise up people for better or worse, is a WhatsApp voice note. That's all.
Yeah.
And the way it will travel. So those are the truths But with it comes even more responsibility. Because now, you don't need to go and get the fuel to start the fire.
Right.
You are literally smoking in a gas station. So that's what we have in our hands now. So the question for me, in Nigeria, how do we use it? How do we share it? There's a thing about negativity, right? Because when people have consistently proven themselves not to be trusted, it is a defense mechanism to go for the negative first. Because worst case scenario, they will disappoint you again, but you won't be disappointed per se, because I expected it anyway. So that's what most people do, right? So we cope by being humorously skeptical, as we all put it. So we always make a fine joke about the problem. That's how we escape our reality. And we'll tell the story. It will make a great joke. In the mess of it, that joke will be flying around. It's a story told, and it's fun, and you will laugh, and all the pain will be just that a bit dealt with. So that's what's been happening with Nigeria. It's easier to do that because it's easier to cope than it's easier to confront. And we have gotten to a point where there's only so much more coping you can do.
Right.
Now you have to confront it. You really just have to. You don't have a choice. So how are we going to do it as a country? And you have the power to tell your stories. How are you going to do it? How are you going to share it? How are you going to cause people to listen and be ignited by your story to say, you know what?
There's something here.
Okay, well, let's do something about this.
Yes. Yes.
It's an interesting thing because it's food from the bottom and from the top. You know, is water from the ground and is rain from the sky, right? So it's water from the ground because there's a beautiful reason. Sometimes we're trying too hard maybe to say, oh, we need to do it because if we don't do it, this person will die or this. Maybe we're trying too hard on the negative because we're doing people that are already used to the negative anyway.
Right.
And maybe it's looking at the beauty of what it means. And just by seeing social media, I think that's what actually happens. So when you see, like, the earthquake that happened,
Turkey and Syria.
It's like 24 hours ago, right? And you're seeing all the stories and the pain and hurt that is coming. Then there is this story of a dog that her babies, she just gave birth shortly before the earthquake, and her babies were stuck in. And the man saw the dog crying and everything, and started helping the dog. The dog was almost distracting the guy because it's her babies that are under there.
Yeah.
And he keeps dragging it out till two of the puppies come out. And there's hope. And that's what people find something to hold on to. We have a lot of those stories here. Maybe it's time for us to start holding on to those stories. Because if you dealt with your ward, if you dealt with your constituency, your small, and do this, there's that child that is going to go from being the one that is on the street, you know, to the one that is feeding people on the streets and taking them out.
And those are the stories we want told.
Yes, so our focus needs to now shift on all the possible positives around us. So you need to do this. You need to get involved in your ward because you are the one that's making roses grow from a concrete. You need to, once you start putting it in that space, the likelihood of people to be less cynical is higher than when you point out the negative of them not getting involved and telling their stories or sharing things that will become great stories. So I think maybe that's the shift we might need to make.
Right. There was a phrase you used. I don't remember what it was, but about something about we laugh at.
Yeah. So we use
a term.
Yeah. For one of our coping mechanisms is we use humorous. Yeah, so humorously skeptical. Yes.
Skeptical, exactly. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hold on to that. I want to talk to Dr. Foy first, but the major thing that I have drawn from what Chuka has said really is, I think it's time to stop cracking all those jokes. I think we've come to a stage where it's no longer funny. What's not funny is not funny anymore. Let's stop trying to be the happiest. We're not even the happiest people on the planet anymore. And it's not even something, it's not an aspirational position. I think it should stop being for anybody who still feels like, oh, we lost that position. I really want us to be the happiest. It's not aspirational anymore. And nothing is funny anymore in this country. It's actually not funny, and it's time to just be serious with our storytelling and with the signals that we're sending out with the words that we're saying. But I'll move to you, Foy. The power of our individual stories, the power of storytelling. You play a major part, or you play a serious part in the music industry. I was going to talk about music. How would you say the music industry is helping the state of the economy right now? Do we still have people who are bold and defiant and telling those stories through music, or is everybody just popping bottles?
It's such a tough question. Because, so let's say the most vocal Nigerian ever was Fela. The most vocal. And everything he said is still happening till today. Yeah. Literally. But then, I think that, so I have a friend in Abuja who is trying, with policy, working with the government. He's trying so hard, I don't need to work. Can the government get private sector to partner with them to tell stories for Africa? For example, the first story I would tell if I have a chance is how hard is it to Japa. I'll carry cameras to Canada and show people suffering.
I don't know that they are shaking like that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that there has to be like a deliberate, so the individuals have to work, but we have to have deliberate partnerships. Right. It can't be just individualistic because we don't have that reach as individuals. So that's one. Two is that, I'm going to say this here, and I'm careful because I eat from them too. So I'm careful. But the platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Netflix, they also have an agenda. And I don't think that their agenda is about a great Nigeria. Their agenda is their agenda. I'm not going to talk about their agenda. That's not the conversation. Yeah. So we also have, as Nigerians, to create platforms. It's tough, it's long-term, it's investment, it's internet penetration, it's a lot of work, but we need platforms that we can control. So now, the median age of Nigeria, World Bank says 18, let's say 19. 64% of Nigerians are 19. So we have, see, you know what this man did now, Rwandan president? Yes. My friend said that even in schools, he got spies. He paid students cash. If you talk about Rwanda bad.
I'm sorry to cut in. I was in South Africa. We got into a cab with a Rwandan driver, and we asked, oh, what tribe are you from? And he said, there's no tribe.
There's no tribe.
He said, there's no tribe. It is one Rwanda, because they're not going back to that genocide area.
This man did magic. Now, was it brutal? It was brutal. Was it from the top? It was from the top. It was collaborated. Rwanda is now perceived as a better economy than Nigeria. Perceived. Even my club, Arsenal.
Yeah. Congratulations this year.
So I'm just saying that it has to be very collaborative. Yeah. It has to be from the top. And we have to understand that these platforms that we eat from, so forgive me, all of us, you too eat from them. So these platforms don't have Nigeria as their agenda. Some of them is just for a global. So we have to create platforms. And I'm not saying Instablog, that's not a platform. You know what I mean? Thank you.
Yeah, no, but you know what they say, that even a dead clock is right 2 times a day.
That's a day, yeah.
So, Instablog, hello to you. Okay, I've been signaled to wrap up. If we were to have a national agenda that would be propagated through media, what should it be? So we're all here now. We all have our phones. We all have our platforms. Some of us have our websites, Instagram, all of that. What is that story we should start channeling? What are we supposed to start putting into the atmosphere right now about Nigeria, especially with these elections coming up. And one thing I've realized is sometimes media can fail. You know, sometimes media can fail because people with the most money who are buying up the most media time are not the most popular, depending on who you ask anyway. But what should the national narrative be for Nigeria, in your opinion? And I'm really hoping that this kind of conversation just transcends and becomes something that we can all agree on. So all the Nollywood producers start to think a certain way, the music producers start to think a certain way. Us as individuals start to think that way when we're writing whatever epistle, for those who write epistles on social media, whatever epistle we're going to write, it influences that. What should the Nigerian national narrative be?
I want to go first before Chuka.
Okay.
Because so that
I have 1 minute, please.
So that he won't shut me down. He's very intelligent. I'll say that it's Nigeria bless Nigeria. It's Nigeria, Nigerians bless Nigeria. I'll say that the narrative should be, I'll say that even if we don't get the president we deserve, Nigerians tried. So Nigeria can save Nigeria. Nigeria bless. So I pray we get the president we deserve. I can't say anything here now. But maybe we don't get him. Maybe we don't get him. It's a fact. And it's such a tipping point. But even if we don't, we should talk about the numbers that came out to vote. Right. We should, like, Nigeria can do it. We were close this time. Tough media. But Nigeria can save Nigeria. Okay. And then we do it through tourism, we do it to policy. But
in the different offices.
Yeah. I will also add that the diaspora is needed in this era. And it's long talk, so I can't say it now, but they're needed because they also need to start talking about how, I'm sorry, but how inauthentic America is and how they miss Nigeria. So it's a collaborated effort. But they have to do it. But it's collaborated. Yeah. So that's it. It's that Nigeria can save Nigeria. Nigerians can save Nigeria. We tried, we came out for the first time. Okay. Yeah, that has to be the energy.
Okay.
Yeah. So we must go with the momentum.
Right.
Yeah.
And we start sharing different stories of people.
The numbers came out for the first time. This came out.
The communities impact.
We push. For the first time, the voting was that. Like it has to be that. It has to be positive, even if we don't get. If you get the guy, that was a different story.
All right.
But yeah.
Okay, Chuka.
Okay. I'd say that the narrative we need to push the most is that we are the greatest black nation on earth, and we are going to start showing it now.
Right.
That will be the narrative for me, and the reason is simple. America were nothing really.
I said they are potholes.
When they started making their noise.
Yeah.
And the people have chosen to believe it. But you must live up to your hype as well. So they started working to live up to the hype they created. That's the simple truth.
Right.
So, look, we have too many things to hype about.
Too many.
Too many things to hype about. You can, even if you're going to say, we're going to do it in a way whereby we're going to speak about our internal ambassadors, our external ambassadors. External ambassadors, you're going to talk about Asisa Toshuala, for example, destroying records. Talk about our musicians. Talk about our surgeons. Somebody goes in, removes a baby,
and
operates on the baby and puts the baby back.
Fetus, yeah. Yep.
But meanwhile, look, you have movies about Dr. Carson, Gifted Hands.
Yes.
And you didn't do it for your own. You guys have a gang of heroes, past, present, and coming. You haven't told their stories. And when you tell stories, you now weave in all the intricate relationships across tribe that made it happen. And then you demystify that idea that, there's one. No. Once you're doing that, you're lifting. Like I said, when I was talking about telling the little stories that are positives in those places, it's the same way. You've lifted it from the bottom, you're lifting it from the top now. Right. I will go into a place and say, go and watch that movie about us. I'll start a movie and say, the 20, for example, and this is just a scenario, the 20 most corrupt, fraud-driven countries in the world did blah, 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 and amassed so amount of money in theft. Nigeria is not on that top 20 list. Yeah. And that's the truth.
And it's the truth.
It's the truth.
It is.
So from the beginning, we'll start showing you that, okay, so I will demystify stuff. I will put us in that position where you look at us and be like, okay, we've eaten all this BS about Nigeria long enough. Let's find out about the real Nigeria.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. So we can do it.
Right.
And we'll literally tell you that the biggest fraud in Nigeria is the fraud that's been told about the Nigerian narrative.
Yes. Come on.
So that's what I would do. I will focus on stories that weave in all our positives about being the greatest country, black nation on earth, coming for the throne, gunning for it. Right. And when we do it, the Nigerians themselves will start to rise to that, because anywhere they go, they want to talk about where they're from. Nigerians are already proud people. Nigerians are already people that go into places and do amazing things, and I'm Nigerian already.
And you know the funny thing, first of all, I love the synergy between what both of you said. It's just spot on. The funny thing is Nigerians don't even permit other people to talk nonsense about us. Outside, you cannot, like all those other African countries, like don't even play with us, don't try. What are you saying? No, I've never, what happened? No, I don't know where you heard that from, but I feel like with ourselves and inside from here now, we need to be more positive, because that's what the media will carry. If there is a story going out, I know there are the dangers of a single story, but if there's a single story going out from all of us here, we have our phones, like I said, we have our platforms, like I said, and yes, we start telling those stories, we start to change even the mindsets of the next person, the person behind us. Let's talk more about intertribal marriages. You know, how a beautiful Yoruba girl married a handsome Calabar boy. It's a beautiful story. Does anybody know that story? Story is here. Yeah. So I want to say thank you so much.
On what you said just now, the danger of a single story.
Completely. We've
been telling the single story since. So that's the danger. The single story has been a negative story. Now let's balance it.
On that note, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know who is handling the Q&A session, but we will stop with this panel for now. Thank you.
And the media is guilty of this. Unfortunately, I think we're perhaps the only country that likes to post up the bad news and criticize government, because job. If you have any question online, and maybe I'll start with, or on site, please, by show of hands. Someone wanted to ask a question. Okay, brilliant. Great. So just tell us who you want to ask a question to, and then the person will respond. Thank you. No, I know you can't see us on the floor. Just imagine our faces.
Okay, my question is to the politicians. We always talk about the Nigeria's presidents needing to win 2/3 of the states in Nigeria. So what is 2/3? Is it 24, which is 24 states, or is it 25 when we include the FCT?
That's a good question. Okay, I think so. No, I will ask. Honorable Shay, do you want to respond to that?
All right. As I said, it's a unique situation because we've never really been in that position, but I understand it's the minimum, which is 24. That's what I've always heard, and that's what I believe is the correct answer.
So that's 23 states and the FCT, just for clarification. So we have 36 states in Nigeria. So 2/3 is 23 and the FCT, because the FCT is not a state. So it's always included in that. Is that clear? Does that answer your question? It's 23 states and the FCT, so 24 in total, yes. So the FCT is counted as one of the places you must also is regarded. Right? We're good? Okay.
Evening, everyone. Well done for everything, in terms of everything that we've been hearing here. It's been very educational. So this question is for the politicians as well. We've heard a lot about talking about accountability and what you are able to do within your constituencies if you are elected. So the question is kind of twofold. How much power do you have to enact things that you want to do versus what the party might want to do? And two, how do you get your budget in terms of allocation so that, how do you decide, if you have a lot of great ideas, how does that budget get allocated to you to give you the power to make those decisions? And I guess the final one on accountability, how can we see what your budget is, what you've planned to do with it, and how do we hold you accountable to it in terms of what your results are at the end of the time?
So this is voter education, because yes, so it's around accountability. This information we've talked about in terms of, so I guess in terms of for the budget, maybe I would break it down into from the State House of Assembly and then from the governorship perspective, if that's okay. And then for maybe I would give Mrs. George Organ to speak from the presidency. Are you able to speak to that in terms of the budget?
I actually want to go lower than that.
Oh yes, so I'm starting with the State House of Assembly. So State House of Assembly is really, so State House of Assembly is below governorship. So you would have the councillors, you'd have the local government chairman, then you have this House of Assembly. This is not the National House of Assembly, State House, so it's very close to the people. And then we can go to the governorship, and then we can go on to House of Reps, Senate, presidency at that level. So we're starting House of Assembly is actually, State House is actually really close to the grassroots. Okay?
All right, thank you very much. Like I said, the primary function of the legislator is making laws, and probably the most important one, or we make two, the appropriation law and then the finance law. So appropriation is about spending and finance about how you're getting revenue. For the local level, let me just point on that. Every House of Assembly makes laws for the local, the local government law that we make is what controls the local governments in the state. All right? So the local governments have their budget, they send it to us and the Ministry of Local Government. So it's within the state. But I think to your question is one of the best practices that is being pushed is budgets should be online. It's not enough for us to pass budgets. It must be accessible for people. And we have NGOs that hold us accountable. There are NGOs that tell us things like, don't put in your budget general expenses. What does that mean? What does general expenses mean? So they want us to put it line by line. Is it you want to buy a car? Is it that you want to buy toothpick? Is it that you want to buy sugar? What do you want to spend? And those are the things we follow when we're making laws. So when the ministries bring us their budgets, we look at those things and then we grill them before we pass the budget. And then the next thing is it should be uploaded so that everybody can see. That's the best practice, and that's what a lot of state houses of assemblies are doing right now. Then I'm not sure if there was any other question. The other question, if it was for me.
Yes, that was part of it. I guess the second part was around the decision making, but maybe that was a little different. Like you were talking about it from a slightly higher level. If my road had potholes, who do I go to?
All right. So the other point is that the way our constitution, which is the grand norm, is formed, is that different, because we have the federal, the state, and the local. So we all have different things we're supposed to do. And there's something called the concurrent list, which is both the federal can do and we can do. So pretty much, if it's things like maybe waste management, markets, that's for the local government. It says it in the constitution. Then things like education, some of those things at the state level, and then there's some things like security, national, things like that for the federal. Recent constitutional amendments we're doing, we're taking some things off the federal because we're saying there's no point. Railway, for example, is federal government, so that's why you only have federal rail. And we're saying, no, you can't control railway, so we're bringing it to the purview of the state. Same thing like airports. We're taking it away from the federal. We're bringing it to the state. Those are things that I believe have slowed down our development because everything has to go to Abuja. But with the constitutional amendments we're doing now, we're taking things off and bringing them to the level of the state so that development can be more rapid.
Thank you. We said that Nigeria is a democracy, but it's a monarchy democracy because our president is like the king. There's so much power that's given to the presidency that there's no point even being a federal country because, like he mentioned, security is, so if you have security challenges, it's only they receive their directives from the president, not even your state governor or local government as it obtains in other parts of the world. So I keep thinking I need to bring the microphone to you so you can respond, please.
I agree with most of what Shay has said. I think the only thing I'll add to it is that in setting the budget, we'll benchmark it, or it should be benchmarked to world best standards, mainly World Bank best standards. A lot of people think the World Bank is not appropriate because they think of it as the World Bank, but most of the World Bank projects are being done in Africa and developing countries, so they tend to have a good idea of what numbers should be. So I think if we are able to benchmark a kilometer of road, a kilometer of rail, and whatever project you want to do, that starts to make your numbers have to meet certain things that we can objectively have a conversation about. The second thing, like he said, is publishing it, but not just publishing it line by line items, which is important, but also using infographics to show and make these numbers easily digestible, easily understandable by most of your citizenry. So it's something that will be a joy to engage with. And also, I think another layer that we'll be doing by God's grace will be comparing to other states and to show that we were able to get our citizens the best deal, or our residents or people that live in the state were able to use your money to get the best deal per kilometer of road. So I think that's where I'll leave that. Second question you talked about, I think had to do with something about party. I think you mentioned something like that. How are you able to do certain things regardless of the party? Right? Ultimately, that depends on the party that you join and your pathway to governance, right? So if you come from a very structured party that is entrenched, that is heavily established, they have their way of doing things, right? And you saw what happened in Ambode in Lagos, for instance. I don't want to knock anybody. So I'll just leave it like that. The pathway to governance determines how you're able to make decisions when you actually get into position.
All right, thank you.
I think the only thing that I wanted to add is in terms of best practice globally, Open governance is something that, you know, as a nation, if you do sign up to, it indicates and signals that you want to be accountable. So I know that one of the things that civil society is constantly pushing for Nigeria to be a part of is the Open Governance Initiative, because once you sign up to that, then you have to make certain things open, right? And that means that citizens can access the budget and all of that. So I think in some way Nigeria is already complying, but I don't know that we're fully open. But in terms of at the national level, open governance, and then as I mentioned earlier, organizations like Budget Tracker are making these things more visible and more open. And I think the point that the gentlemen have made around benchmarking and standards, because if you sort of study a lot of nations, so if you hear the story of India and how, I mean, all of us have seen that viral post about how all the CEOs of all the tech companies are Indians, but that was a very deliberate strategy that the nation had. And it actually meant that a certain percentage of their budget went into education. So, you know, even understanding that your budget should not just be a budget, right, but that it should be driven by strategic agenda, I think is really important. So I think those are the kind of things that we should keep our eyes on.
Yeah. Something else I also want to mention in terms of active citizenship is that we also have a Freedom of Information Act, which means that as a person, as an organization, you can request for information about anything from a government parastatal. So for instance, if you wanted to know how the Lagos state government spent its money, or the local government, you can institute the Freedom of Information Act and anyone can actually access it. But the only thing is that many Nigerians don't know about this and many people don't do this. So this information we're asking about in terms of line items, they won't publish it by themselves, but you can, by the Freedom of Information Act, you can request for it. And that's what SERAP does a lot of times, and a number of organizations, they use that act. It is actually a very powerful act that many Nigerians are not aware of. And of course, they're not going to publish it because they don't want you to be aware of it, because you can literally ask them, how did you spend this money? Who did you award this contract to? And they have to give you the details from that act. All right. Okay, so any more question, or on-site or online? On-site, online, okay. Please ask anything about that we've talked about today. All right, we have Pastor Mo. Good to see you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for very insightful panels. I want to ask contestants. So generally, there is this chasm between the campaigning to the grassroots vis-a-vis campaigning to the elite. Generally, how do you bridge that campaign? I'm talking specifically to candidates on the panel. How do you bridge that, that divide of communicating down on the grassroots level so that you're able to get the last man and get them onto your campaign bandwagon? Because it seems like it's money politics right now, so the person who splashes the most money gets the bigger crowd. But there's something happening that is different. How are you reaching into that, how are you reaching into that opportunity that we have right now, that the people from the grassroots are actually waking up, youths, women, children, and even down to the local communities who are really waking up?
Okay. I think that to be a great politician, you have to be all things to all men and women. I think that you must be able to sell your messages. It's like the poem by Rudyard Kipling, you know, you have to be able to maintain the elite and still keep the common touch. And you must be able to move at different wavelengths based on the people that you're speaking to. And I think you need to have that quality if you want to be the representative of all those interests and all those destinies and all those people, right? I think that's the skill of most politicians. I don't really think you would actually win a primary if you don't have that skill, because the primary process is like a little election, right? You're trying to get all the stakeholders in your party to come together behind you. In relation to the money politics aspect that you talked about, I think that there's a deliberate move by the Labour Party, mainly one because we don't have money. No bullion van has accidentally come to our secretariat. We're still waiting for it. I mean, it's a prayer that we're praying. But you're laughing. I'm serious. But seriously though, I feel that, you see, if you want to work for a people, it is borderline insulting for those people for you to pay those people to work for them. And I find myself going back to ground zero when I got into politics, because I got into politics under the Kowa party. And I was extremely naive, I was extremely idealistic, but I remember that the thing that really affected me was the idea of buying votes. I could not stomach it. I felt that if I buy your votes, I lose respect for you. If I lose respect for you, then I cannot serve you. And if I can't serve you, then there's no point being in this anyway. And then over time, I guess I rewired my mind to the idea that Jesus fed the people that he was speaking to. You need to meet Nigeria where she is, take her where she needs to be. And the idea that, you know, I have to check my privilege. You know, the idea that I'm only hungry because I've not yet eaten, or I decided to fast. And if somebody is truly hungry, you mix poison in the food in front of him, walk away, that person will come back, you see the person eating that food. So you need to take account of the realities of Nigeria. But that being said, the question, especially in Lagos, is the equation is not balanced, because we've left for too long the people that cannot afford to say no to that 500 naira, 1,000 naira, to be the main determinants of who the governor or who, you know, and we're not taking anything away from that reality of the poverty in Nigeria, but we're saying the people that are behind this huge IGR in Lagos State, the people that are waking up every morning, sitting there in traffic on 3rd Mainland Bridge and getting up to get to their business and do their work, you guys also participate. Let's make this equation slightly more balanced so that we have a representative type of government that leads us. And I think that's where this no shishi thing came from, right? And the honest truth is, I've seen this thing catch fire. It's shocking. I've gone to party meetings and I'm leaving, people are giving bottles of wine. The first time this happened to me, I thought they wanted to poison me. No, you're laughing, but it was a very shocking, like, cognitive dissonance moment, because they said I should come there. They did not ask me for money before I got there to set up, to get DJs and everything. And then as I was leaving, they would give me wine. I went to the next meeting, they would give me cashew. I was like, what's really going on? You know? And then I remember during October 1st, when we're moving around, there was one young man at Amuodofin that came out to me and like, Alaye, and the whole crowd shouted him down. We know they give shishi, we know they collect shishi. Right? So I believe that is the birth of a new type of thinking and an awakening. Now, whether that will be sustained or not will be left for the people to see. Because, you know, some people might start on that high note, but then things get hard and the wallet starts to feel the pain and they start looking at the politician again. It's like a lion trying to be a vegetarian. And then you start to remember that, come, we are supposed to be chopping these guys, you know. Let's hope that, you know, they can remain vegetarians long enough for us to fix things, and then they can have a good Nigeria that they won't have to do that, right? But it's a marvel to watch. And I truly believe that that's the only pathway we can get to servant leadership. Because even in the no giving shishi, we're still spending quite a lot of money. We're still spending quite a lot of money. You do rallies, you have to pay for security, your banners, you put it today, somebody's party takes it down tomorrow, you know, all that kind of thing. But it's new, it gives me hope. And I pray that it can be sustained and we can get somewhere, you know. Yeah.
Amen.
You know, it's just, it speaks to what Chuka and Foy was saying earlier about the media. It's the media catching this no shishi movement and blowing that particular story and making heroes out of these guys so that the ones can actually see them to say, listen, we did this. It's not that we did this. This is our movement. We need to let them own this movement, right? Because that's where you get them from. Once you can get the people to own the movement, then guess what happens? It spreads. Because the way of politics today, what we know is someone says, all they say is someone said we should vote. Once a person says we should vote, everybody's voting. So they've always been followers. But imagine letting them know that they own this, it's theirs. And the narrative is important. The storytelling is important. And this is where all of this, I want to commend, the convener, the 7,000, because you see, just putting these different topics together, it tells you how everything comes together. It all comes together really well. That if we can harness what we're saying here over a period of, it's not going to happen overnight, but we're saying be consistent with it, okay? That we see him running for gubernatorial today. It turns out that he becomes the governor. Hell, if it doesn't, we'll see him again 4 years from now. We want to be able to see that consistency. But how do we help him maintain that consistency? How do we show how far he's gone, what he's done? Do you understand? And continue to say, listen, even though the election has gone, but we're still putting the media storytelling to say this is what he's been doing and this is what he continues to do. By the time you get to the next 4 years, he's completely in a different place. Because there's a movement that has begun and it's been stoked. I always say, look, 2019 was the year where we announced that young people can get involved. Yeah. 2020 was the year where they knew that they could get involved and they said, guess what? We wanted to stand for justice. Justice was the issue. It hasn't changed. 2023 is about justice. So it's a protest vote. Justice, we don't want these guys. Do you understand? We want anybody else but these guys. So you can see that so you have to be able to ensure that you maintain that momentum. How do you do that? It's the media that does that. Yeah. And so there has to be, when you guys were speaking, I was saying to myself, we need to be able to sit down outside of this together, and just say to ourselves, listen, what's the narrative? It doesn't matter which party you're in. It doesn't matter the fact is that there must be a common narrative that we're pushing. How do we do that? Because one of the things I do not like is sitting down at gatherings like this and everybody goes, and that's it. So I want to leave the convener the responsibility that gather every one of these panelists. Let's sit together and let's begin to look at what you're doing, how you're doing that, right? And how do we begin to maintain this and push this through? We're touching something, but you have to be very intentional on how you carry what you're touching out. And that's what we're saying. There's nothing impossible. If you look at the figures and the numbers, 50,000 people, 700 and something thousand people. I mean, that just tells you that if we're working things out right, if we're thinking right and we're acting right, 4 years from now, things will shift. But I'm very confident about how things are going to shift in this particular dimension that we're in. But we need to maintain the momentum, because if that door is open and you don't feel that void, they will come back 7 times stronger than they were. And I want to close with commending each and every one of the candidates for just being out there, putting yourself out there, doing what it is that you're doing. Because nobody, running a political party, being a national chairman of a political party, I saw things that I realized that the media, what they fed us outside, not ordinary citizens, was different from what's happening on the inside. I think the first thing that hit me was just dealing with a typical politician. And I could see the guy look at me. He's telling a lie. He knows I know he's telling a lie. And he knows that I must believe the lie that he's telling. Simple. So that's a wake-up call for me to say, okay, all right. So we started this movement about the new Nigeria, and we all gathered together and said, hey, new Nigeria. We were so passionate about it. When it came to time for primaries, there was a divide.
There were camps. And that's the Nigeria we're in. But you see, the thing is, we don't get discouraged by this. You understand? But we continue to, each time we take a step further, we're getting there. But you never get discouraged. And I think that that's what we get to the people to understand, that for every time you build, that momentum continues. We've seen it happen from 2019. We're seeing it in 2020. We're seeing it in 2023. It will be the same in 2027. But we have to maintain that narrative. I want to be able to tell a story from how it started in 2019, how it escalated in 2020, how we're seeing the manifestation in 2023. That's what I'm looking at. That's the responsibility I want to leave with the media, to say, how do we get this on?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, PD. We have just one final question, and Dr. Longa, he's giving you an assignment. So there's always an assignment after the 7,000 movement. So the media guys, this question is for Dr. Foy and Chuka. The media guys, this sort of storytelling will cost plenty. How can one fund it? If possible, please give answers that are, that we can relate to, because people want to watch Aki and Popo. So, and that's what they can fund. What do you say?
Just following from what he said, let me paint, there's a reality that nobody's saying, is that the median age of Nigeria is 18, 19. So in 4 years, it's 20 what? 23. The cost of funding them is on their phone, is social media. When I read yesterday about Elon Musk bringing Starlink and this thing, the world wants internet penetration in the north, in the state. They know. So some people have an agenda for internet penetration in the north. So I won't say the funding first. I will say, what is the story? What's the story? Are we the No Shishi Avengers? Are we? I sound funny, but that's how you take it. It's the story, not the funding. That's number one. Number two is that global interests. Global interests can fund. Global interest. India was hugely funded by global interests. They just need to see that this country will become sustainable, stable. If they bring foreign investment here, it will not die. They just need to see the indices of growth, but global interest. So the answer is, one, what is the story? Two is, how can we, in the next 4 years, position ourselves? Because the global interests, more is not the problem. Is the story and the Chuka, please.
Yeah, so he's almost said everything. The fact is that we've believed more in the power of money than the power of what money is supposed to be used for. That has been a Nigerian issue. Money is an end as against a means to an end. One of the greatest movies ever made, in my opinion, is Scent of a Woman. 11 Oscar nominations, all that. It could have been a Nigerian story. Slumdog Millionaire could have been a Nigerian story. A lot of the movies that are amazing are not the movies that have the blockbuster budget. And I love blockbusters. I drew comic books for a living. That's what I went to ever do, drawing comic books and creating those kind of stuff. But we need to understand that start off by telling the story. You need to start off by telling the story. Sometimes the people who are putting out, let's look at even Kaby Lane, for example, when he started his TikToks. They were simple TikToks, cheapest things. Now he has Latan and co in his TikToks. So the money went up in quotes. The value went up in quotes, but the story was there. So we don't have to go out with the maddest of stuff, shoot it on your phone. First of all, have a gang of amazing stories that you've made with what you have. And then watch them come and say, the movie you're telling, these stories you're telling, they are too good for this platform now. We want so and so person to do this with you. But the stories are there. We grew up. It's crazy how I find out that the stories I was told by my parents and by my family members are the same stories all of you were told and were told before then. And who was sharing these stories in a time when you didn't even have phone? But they were spreading and they were becoming staples because they were powerful without media. So because we've seen too much of flashiness, and I understand it. I mean, once you hear on Netflix, there's something expecting to see. You know, when you go into the cinema, it's going to see a blockbuster, massive money spent. That's great. That's amazing. We'll get there. I have a lot of stories that I can't do now because, yes, we can't do that just yet. But we have a lot of stories that we can tell that will get us there. And that's what we should be focusing on. Imagine if Nollywood had said, oh, we don't have money to shoot. You know, we don't have money to do what we want to do. But look at where they are today. The same thing with our music industry. Then all of a sudden, they're now throwing certain projects at you that don't make sense because you grew it yourself. We can do that with the stories we need to tell for Nigeria. We need to just be more ingenious about it. You can shoot an entire stuff, and last time I said, find people who want to do it, who believe in it. They're not coming to you. Don't go and look for someone and say, oh, yeah, just cash everything. Be doing it, and then people that actually want to do this with you, they want to put their talent down because they believe in it. Then come up with an agreement. And then when actually it becomes big, you guys can share your money if it happens. But that's it. Find the stories. You have the stories. Find them. Tell the ones that your resources now will allow you tell. Save the ones that when you have blockbuster money, you will do. Because a lot of times, those stories that you see those blockbuster guys do, they had it a long time. You just knew we didn't have time yet. James Cameron didn't have the technology for Avatar when he had the story. But he waited for it. They waited another 10 years to do the next one. So that's what we just need to understand. Focus on the story and let everything else fall into place.
Much. Just to wrap up, to say that content is king. You know, when you were speaking about it, content is king, and I'm glad you took away the perspective from, oh, how do we get the money, to how can I give value so that I can attract money and people are chasing me for money. And there's a reason why all these companies are coming to Nigeria. Something that they see that we don't see. Starlink, Netflix, Disney, Amazon. You think it's because they just want to pump money? They just like us.
Dave Chappelle, you know Dave Chappelle, spoke about 3 months ago in the Breakfast Club that he wants to do I can send the links, a Nigerian film. And they asked him why. He said 2 things. He said, first of all, global media is getting so fast with technology that AI will begin to edit phenomenal movies. So where are the authentic stories? He says Nigeria.
Absolutely.
He said it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And what a powerful way to end tonight's session. It has been simply mind-blowing. A big thanks to our fantastic speakers and panelists. Thank you so much, PED, Pastor Emmanuel Dania. Thank you, Honorable Sheya Disa. Thank you, Mr. Gbadebo, Patrick Gbadebo Roadsvival, GRV, Architect of Lagos. Thank you so much, Mrs. Abosede George Organ. Thank you so much, Mr. Chuka Obi, a.k.a. Xavier Obi. Thank you so much, Dr. Tochukwu McFoy, a.k.a. Dr. Foy. A big round of applause, please, for our fantastic panelists. Thank you. I think we should take a picture with everyone with Dr. Longe joining them. Feels so good to call her Dr. Esther Longe. Oh, they promoted her, Professor Longe. pushing away or taken away from tonight's meeting. Please don't let it end here. Let's spread the message far and wide. Make sure you spread something about it online. I'd like to invite back on stage to perform. I'd like to invite, we heard her earlier today and with a very beautiful voice. One of the stories that we should take out of Nigeria to the rest of the world. Yeah, please let's give it up for Seal. I always want to call her Seal Soul because that's her. So I had to hold myself from stopping her Seal. Please, a round of applause. Such an amazing, talented voice from Nigeria to the world. He said I need to keep talking.
People gather, standing by the bridge, wearing white and green, busy dancing about something they don't know about, but their father's hiding something. We join in celebrating, blinded by the view. Realities, we missed the point a real long time ago. We must awake, get on to you. Kangwagi Akuko ala Nigeria. Oh, sound the alarm, sound the alarm, sound the comes again and we gather analyzing. I guess we are blessed. I won't try to make you feel good till we clear up all the mess that the fathers keep on piling. We're taking to the streets, carry on the struggles of our heroes gone before, avoiding repetitions that brought us to all four. Dark, we will waiting for a change. If you and I do nothing, then nobody will. And someday we'll all be asking, how did it all happen? Why did we fold our arms and do nothing? Can't see Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, Seal with Sound the Alarm.